Okay, we are live now. 3/25/2024, full moon. I think we just had an eclipse leading up to the big one. That was Tears on the Big Screen. This is some AI generated, I guess you would say. This is some music created on a website called, and I'm going to share a link to it, suno.ai. And what you do is you prompt it and it presents you with some music. And Tears on the Screen was just my attempt to put something satirical out there about actors and how they're representing themselves on the news, etc. Things we can't say, but we can have music about them. And it's actually pretty decent. And of course, you've probably heard this if you're subscribed at the main YouTube channel. Here's another one. This is an epic rant, rather a rap. And here's the actual the prompt. I said here that I wanted, quote, an epic rap about Ryan who has a Mandela effect and thinks his name is Brian. And he's awaiting a big check from Ed McMahon. So that's the theme. And here's what it presented. So here we go. This is generated by suno.ai.
Yo, listen up, let me tell you about Ryan. Got a mind so twisted, thinking he's Brian. But it's all a Mandela effect, don't you see? He's looking for a big check from Ed McMahon. Ryan's out here living in a parallel universe, claiming his name is Brian, it's getting worse. But I gotta break it to him, he's got it all wrong. Ed McMahon ain't giving out checks, move along. Ryan, oh Ryan, you're lost in a dream, thinking you're Brian, chasing the scheme. But you gotta wake up, face reality. No big check from Ed McMahon, just let it be.
Now, having rendered a few of these, and I've spent about an hour and a half making a ton of things, jingles, making commercials, stuff to add into the 24/7 stream. It's very useful. But it occurred to me that people like The Weeknd or Taylor Swift may not even exist, which is actually kind of good news. But they are easily replaceable. Prince, for example, could have thousands of songs released into eternity. You wouldn't know if someone died or not. Are they still recording music? Sounds like it. And it's only getting better. Here are a couple of tracks. I asked for gospel music that thanks God for the flat earth.
With every step we take, we feel the Maker's grace. The earth is flat, a masterpiece in space. Thank you, Jesus.
It even thanks Jesus. Again, this isn't real necessarily. Here's another one.
Shining like the stars. For the earth is flat and it is so divine. Praise be a testament to the...
It even mentions the firmament. Okay, one more. Les Go says music passes. Yeah, actually, it's incredible. This is a chemtrail rap, and I dare any of you not to like this.
Yo, listen up, I gotta tell a tale about the chemtrails in the sky ringing the alarm bell. They poisoning the air, messing with the brain waves. Got us feeling dizzy, got us caught in their maze. They spraying chemicals trying to keep us all asleep, but I ain't falling for it, I'm wide awake. I'ma keep spreading the truth, making people aware. They try to control us, but I won't play fair. Chemical conspiracy.
All right, there you have it. That's called Chemical Conspiracy, and I didn't name the track. I just prompted it, and it's basically about a chemtrail truther who's not going to be deterred by the normies who don't believe him about the mind-altering chemicals in the air. And I've been using this for jingles, commercials. I have a lot of interesting tracks that you'll be hearing in the near future, and it's going to be very useful for some of our other productions. For example, documentaries, animations. In fact, I think I have another example. This one might be a little too intense for the live stream. I wanted some kind of a track to describe a battle between cyborg penguins cleaning up a deep underground military base that has been infested with genetically enhanced rats. And it's just a storyline I've had for some time. We have the storyboard, but I asked for a track, and I specified I wanted it in some kind of like black metal industrial style. So here is this one. It's called Penguinotti. Yeah, probably not appropriate for right now, but interesting, the possibilities. It's just another thing that has made a lot of people replaceable. Just like last month, I was given a beta test on Amazon where you upload an ebook and it will present it as an audiobook for sale, full royalties to you, without having to share it with a human reader. Dewis and Paris says sounds soulless. Well, that's the thing. Is this incredible or is it sad that it's actually as good, if not better, than what we hear on the radio all the time? Armin Reese says artists will soon be AI. At that point, music will be made by humans, will be a luxury that people will pay for, like organic beef. Yeah, organic art, sure. But I want to point out too that the only people that I really see using this stuff, because I've been using it since Deep Story, I've been using this for a while, as far as for editing, and I have been incorporating a lot of this type of artwork into what we do here and other things. But I found a lot of uses for it. But my point of it is, I don't see this being adopted or used by people who aren't ordinarily creating stuff. So this is just another tool for artists. Like Photoshop didn't get rid of photography, the airbrush didn't get rid of the paintbrush, which is what people thought back then. I don't see this changing anything. If I was a songwriter, I might use this to create something to use as a template, but again, I don't think it's going to replace anybody. AI won't replace anybody, but the people who use it will replace people who don't. It's a tool. Elephant Tusk says, my brother's super talented. He's obsessed with AI art and song creation. It's super sad to see. See, there's this weird Luddite tendency among conspiracy theorists and the right to be against technology, any new innovation. And I'm like, why? If you're using high-speed internet, then you might as well accept that you're going to accept the Neuralink. Probably not the implant at first, but you're going to have some wearable eventually. There's no sense in pretending like you're going to resist the flow of technology and everything that it's bringing. But a few other things to consider here. People who aren't really skilled at articulating their ideas, whether it's spoken or visual or even music, are now going to be incredibly enabled, which can only benefit. I mean, sure, it's going to generate a lot of noise, but I think it's also going to have an overall net effect that's positive. Let's continue here. Slowburn1 says, sad, don't have the real human touch musically, it is off. See, I would dispute this. I would argue, like the Turing test, is it a real person, isn't it? I would imagine that I could have a group of people listen to that Flat Earth gospel track who don't know if it's fake or not, and they'll think it's real. We talk about real or fake, and can you tell if it's real or fake, and how my contention is that they have intentionally blurred the lines by using crappy CGI instead of organic effects, which don't age as well as the organic effects. We've talked about this quite a lot. The guy that did special effects for 2001 Space Odyssey, Douglas Trumbull, special effects guru, said that his effects from 50 years ago age better because he used models and real props rather than everything created within a computer, which he said just doesn't age as well. My point being, they've done this on purpose to make us susceptible to the worldview fakery, the fake news, the fake everything. And I think similarly with music, we've seen more and more this trend towards removing the human touch, more polish, more auto-tune. I mean, deadly levels of auto-tune. Didn't Travis Scott kill like 9 people with auto-tune? Death by auto-tune. My point of it is just simply that people can't tell real from fake visually, and they're not going to be able to hear the difference either. People are going to be lost. Yeah, that's right. Tim Osman drove by a fake buffalo today. We saw an image of that because buffalo are fake. I want to clarify this. Yesterday I mentioned the meme. Someone had pointed out some meme and it had what I said, the Eddie Murphy meme. Now, just so you know, this Eddie Murphy meme generator guy is not Eddie Murphy. I know it's not Eddie Murphy. But if you search Eddie Murphy meme generator, you get this guy. So just to be clear, and I think it was who was it that told me? Somebody in the comments mentioned. It's like, yeah, I know. I heard. People think this guy's Eddie Murphy. He's not. People also have been sharing this picture of Johnny Depp, whose face has been swapped with Courtney Cox, and they're saying, this is Johnny Depp. Like, don't people search their images anymore? Let's see what else we have. Donald Trump saying he's Christ. Nothing new there. New movie called Late Night with the Devil. Opening night, and this is just a coincidence. $666,666. Mere coincidence. Not a PR stunt. No way they could fake something like that, because man's not capable of faking stuff like that. It would require the demiurge, aliens, advanced computers that we can't see, or God. Isn't that the reasoning that a lot of truthers use? Now, we were getting into the Crocus Theater or Crocus concert, and one of the last things I mentioned, which I think bears repeating, is someone had done a search on the theater itself, and they found they could not find any examples of recent reviews, as in Yelp reviews or any kind of reviews since like 2017. And even looking at Google Maps and satellite imagery, they couldn't find any evidence that the parking lot was even in use in that time. So what does that mean? Psyopsicle says Diddy's the modern day OJ, the Bronco's the private jet. Yeah, we saw that. Diddy, we've heard this has been building for some time in the truther circles, Trutherville. The word is that Diddy is like the Epstein to the hip hop world. And there are all kinds of weird things. I mean, if you think it's weird, and when you see these celebrities hanging out with other celebrities and they make these strange inferences, but we shall see. I did see an image of his home, and it looked like his children were in handcuffs. Something about sex trafficking. The kind of stuff that Tim Ballard is into. And then he does movies about fighting it. Here's the image of one of the shooters from the event. One had his ear chopped off and fed to him. And then, of course, this guy had his eyeball popped out. During his arrest, Mohammed Sabur's eye fell out of its socket. And of course, there you have the eye just on top of his eye socket, like literally popped out. But his mouth is closed and his other eye is closed. I don't know what to make of it. I saw another picture. One of them was having his genitals electrocuted with some kind of a battery, like a car battery. It was pixelated, but it looked, I mean, it's fakeable. This is theater. Here's one more point about the theater where the thing took place. It was empty. They filled it up with a bunch of actors, just like the movie Tenet. It's just like every other psyop. It checks off every box. It's extraordinary. The timing of it, well, we predicted it. Yeah, 322. It's the Skull and Bones ritual. And there's more. We have uncovered quite a lot more to indicate that this thing was planned long in advance, drilled for. There were actual drills conducted there. And there was also some strange references to Vegas all over it, which ties into this theme of the concert shootings. The HBIC says there was no screaming or panic in the theater. Yeah. Now, this may or may not be something. There's a new Ghostbusters movie. Look, I tried to watch the one from 2016 so I could watch this one and have a sense of continuity, and I couldn't get more than 3 minutes in. I couldn't even follow the monologue. It wasn't even close to funny. I wasn't capable of watching that one. It was terrible. But the new one's called Frozen Empire, and someone has connected this to Godzilla and Kong, the new empire. So the theme here, Empire, New Empire, Frozen Empire. Not quite sure, but Game of Thrones, winter is coming. For some time, we've kind of correlated this with the nuclear winter. And so Frozen Empire may be an allusion to that. As far as Godzilla, well, Godzilla is a metaphor for the atomic bomb. Came out the year of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We recently had the Godzilla movie, which passed Oppenheimer. So there's that. Godzilla, by the way, was stored at sub-level 33 in one of the previous movies, and of course that's somewhat related to the new Fallout series on Amazon, which takes place in Vault 33. All right, let's move on here. Ted Stricker 2112 says that eye pick is really convincing. Yeah, that looked like some kind of Halloween prop. None of it's convincing to me because this is it's an investigation. It's a mass murder, and yet every aspect of it is being televised. We see the guys being arrested. We see them being tortured. I called it out. It's going to be an episode of Scooby-Doo. Scooby-Doo Justice. Something bad happens. It gets solved, and at the end they unmask the bad guy, and we all found out at the same time who it was and why. In one episode, you get the whole story. Truthers are the most visually illiterate people out there. It's a very common thing. So Furious George said this is not AI. This really happened. Trump allowed the bastard Lavrov to sit in the Oval Office at the president's desk. If you are pro-Ukraine, this should make you nauseous. So this individual is saying this is not AI, you can trust me. This should make you nauseous. Well, the added context is this is a digitally altered photograph. The heads have been swapped. So many liars on both sides. That's why I'm suggesting that we just got to nuke Trutherville altogether. There's nothing there worth salvaging. People who are still there are just behind the times, on the wrong side of everything at this point. A couple more strange little turns here, then we'll get back onto the important subjects. QAnoners are fawning over Barron Trump. Chairman Wilding here, and these people have huge accounts. They're more popular than I could ever be on Twitter. They have like 50,000 subs, 5 million subs, because they spend all day fawning over JFK Jr. and young pictures of Donald Trump. These people are in a cult. Well, now their obsession, and this is very unhealthy, it's on Barron Trump because he's 18 now or something. So they're always focusing on how he's an angel, like literally a Nephilim, because of his height. And they're suggesting that maybe Trump was supposed to lose. And this was always the plan because it was always about Barron Trump, time-traveling Barron Trump. Well, this is a Twitter account called John's Army. And by the way, I had that website generate a rock song about JFK Jr. coming down with aliens to save the world. I'm going to release an album, don't you worry if you've missed that. But anyway, they're focusing on this individual saying, it's funny. As he matures, Barron looks like a perfect combination between President Trump and Princess Diana. So they're imagining in their weird fan fiction religion that Donald Trump had sex with Princess Diana and that Barron Trump is the product. They're fantasizing about this, which is kind of sick considering that Princess Diana publicly admitted to having, well, it was publicly known she was having a relationship with JFK Jr. So JFK Jr. and Trump both got with Princess Di, and Trump got her pregnant. And JFK Jr., by the way, was also sleeping with Ghislaine Maxwell. Well, in response to this nonner, this Kool-Aid drinker, had said it's time to pray, and they have the praying emoji. So they're praying. And JFK fan 325 says it's time to pray. Now, this guy has been saying since last November that JFK is going to come back tomorrow. It's always going to be tomorrow. It's the calendar that's wrong, not him. But here's what he said. Let's pray that they crash the economy near Christmas or Easter. It has to be biblical. It is now time to pray because we're right here on the verge. So they're praying that next week the economy collapses. It's the most bizarre doomsday cult in the world. Just leave it at that for now. Mango Penguin says, I'm going to let Tim put me to sleep. My subconscious will listen. Yeah, that's how the public actually operates. They have what I call mind aids, where they don't consciously filter the information coming in. Now, you can trust me. I will not infect you with any bad mind viruses. Anything that I put into your mind will only help you. These will just be auto-hoaxology axioms, like fake until proven real. You don't have to believe. Non-believing isn't denialism. So in other words, you'll wake up probably feeling a little more relaxed and edified. Seattle could get the nuke and you wouldn't lose a minute of sleep over it. I won't. Well, I will because I'll be covering it, but I will be unperturbed. But speaking of mind aids, because I started using this term to describe the general public, not just the fact that they're not using critical thinking when it comes to whatever's being pumped out of the media, but that they're conditioned to be this way. to make them vulnerable to mind viruses sent down from government sources. They just don't want non-state approved mind viruses running amok because it'll get their sheeple infected. If you're already understanding the level of fakery that goes into our worldview construction, then you can consider yourself inoculated. But came across this article, The Man Who Thought AIDS Was All in the Mind. This is from a few years ago. This guy Schmidt believed that it was a psychosomatic disease caused by an outbreak of mass hysteria, and they were thinking themselves ill. It was kind of controversial. It's just a throwback story from a few decades ago. But it really got me thinking about psychosomatics and how the people who are spreading fear, if it's baseless, if it's mere superstition, if it's there to keep people in a state of compliance because they're terrified, whatever it happens to be, then you would label them terrorists, right? You are spreading terror. That's what you do. And I think the more that we examine this objectively, we can say quite confidently that the Trutherville community, the Red Pillars, are also terrorists in a sense because they are just helping to spread what would be hypochondria and possible psychosomatic illnesses. I would even say that anybody who died from the suddenly died, the list of people, it could have just been psychosomatic. And we could blame the truthers for having. Imagine that. Imagine the irony. If I'm right and there is nothing to fear, but they've ginned up so much fear that the truthers are actually responsible for real death by way of spreading a psychosomatic hypostition. It's all in the mind. It's a message I got from Pac-Man Has Lockjaw. Okay, so I saw this ridiculous video on some YouTube channel dedicated to physics. 1 minute they're talking about physics, and they're talking about CERN. And the next moment, they're talking about the Mandela effect. And I'm like, look, you can't do this anymore. You cannot talk about the Mandela effect and CERN in the same breath. And that was linked from something Joe Rogan was talking about. So Joe Rogan was talking about something about CERN, and it got this conversation going. But I just want to point out that the Mandela effect has nothing to do with physics or CERN. If you want to understand the Mandela effect, and for some reason the mass media doesn't want to, they like to play dumb about it, you would put it in the category of DSM. It's a psychosomatic, or no, I'm sorry, it's a psychological, I wouldn't say disorder, but you could call it a delusion, a persistent delusion. And it's generally rude to look at someone's religion and its myths and to call it a delusion, especially the true believers, but it might be accurate in some instances. And with the Mandela effect, it's specifically a delusion because it's not really attached to anything transcendent, but it's attached to the dynamic between the person presenting it with their binary, the retroactive interference that they present as an interrogator, and a tainted witness themselves as believers. They are considered to be a tainted witness. So they're asking the question, they're creating the effect. The Mandela effect is a delusion centered around prompted imaginings that are mistaken for memories. They are creating false memories. The Mandela effect community are gaslit to an extreme degree. Very delusional. So my point is, Pac-Man Has Lockjaw said, the fruit of the loom logo had a cornucopia. No one can tell me otherwise. So he's certain of it, and he's not going to accept anybody trying to explain that he's wrong. He remembers that there was a cornucopia in his or on his underwear logo, and nothing's going to change his mind. And just briefly, how did he come to believe this? Easy. Someone says, do you remember this or this? And it's easy to imagine a pile of fruit with a cornucopia behind it, especially when the Mandela effect is so popular that before you even think about it, you're shown both versions. And that creates that sense of, do I really know? A little bit of doubt. It's a gaslighting operation. All right, let's move on. Donald Trump managed to get his bill taken down quite a bit, so he's not losing his tower. Not that I thought he was. I think it's all theater. It's part of his story. his fall and his resurrection. Now we're still waiting for the head wound thing, and many think that the guy with the popping eyeball, Mohammed Sabur's eye falling out, might be a reference to this upcoming Trump thing. And this is pretty extensive. When you get into this Trump head wound stuff, it ties in to many different psyops, and it appears to be predictive programming for something involving a very significant event that's meant to shock the world the way 9/11 did. So there's a reason for these huge buildups. And we often talk about the predictive programming in all these various movies that deliver consistent messaging. The Shining, many people point out it references Apollo 11, and it's Stanley Kubrick admitting that he did it. It's like, no, that's not actually what he's doing. Because in the same movie, they foreshadow 9/11 like crazy. Well, interestingly enough, The Shining, written by Stephen King, was followed by Doctor Sleep. And Doctor Sleep has a character who predicts 9/11. So the book that follows The Shining's, this whole story, the book that follows it, contains 9/11 foreshadowing. I mean, that suggests to me that Stephen King is in the know. But here's an article that was posted by Zen of Machiavelli on it. He said, Dr. Sleep, published in 2013, it's about adrenochrome, but they call it steam. And it's a sequel to The Shining from 1977. And it does, in fact, have this theme that kind of fits in with this adrenochrome story. Here's what it says. Its primary goal is to feed on humans, preferring children over adults since they were easier to scare and manipulate. According to the creature, frightened flesh tastes better, and they use fear to salt the meat. Reminds me of Sputnik. Sputnik was a movie that came out of Russia in August of 2020 about these aliens that resided within the esophagus of its host, the cosmonauts, and they would crawl out at night, scare their victims, and intentionally heighten their fear hormone because that's what they were actually feeding off of. Now here's a Wikipedia excerpt that describes the book. Abra Stone, a baby girl born in 2001, manifests psychic powers and predicts 9/11. I haven't seen the movie. I haven't read the book, but the idea of a baby predicting 9/11 is ridiculous. But the point here is simply that it continues the predictive programming from the first one without Stanley Kubrick's presence, which suggests that, yeah, Stephen King is indeed part of this. This is just getting back to this theme, though, of the Trump head wound phenomenon scenario, whatever it's going to be, and it's building up. Okay, let's move on. I thought that was worth mentioning because it kind of takes Stephen King into the realm of metascriptors. Yesterday we talked about the Call of Duty, Modern Warfare 2, and how video games are examples of predictive programming. And I want to make a point about it because the people who think predictive programming is synchronicity or it's magic or it's dark occultists, all the people who mystify it focus on the movies and the TV shows with the weird tie-ins. But I think it's more important to even consider video games, which are far more immersive than movies. And you can see the messaging is far more targeted. In other words, it's always political. These are messages in these video games that are geared towards steering you into the geopolitical changes in the world. That's what Modern Warfare is about. All these games are preparing you for upcoming World War III scenarios. It's to plug you into the news. It's contained within the same propaganda circle. So for the predictive programming to always align with the political agendas and what's going to come out on the news suggests that maybe it's not coming from a higher source. It's not leading people to any kind of awakenings or epiphanies. It's like, what's with all this repetition and themes in all these various movies? Well, repetition is part of propaganda. And we are being obviously hit with propaganda 24/7 to get us to accept the fake news, which is written in advance because they write our history. Our history is faked day by day. And as a group here, as a think tank, we've had a continuity of an alternate history that includes the possibility that they're lying about a lot of stuff. We may not have the full picture. We may not know what they're covering up with their lies, but we know what's not believable. And we also know why they are insisting that everyone believes in these unbelievable things. Elephant Tusk says the strange thing about video games is they take forever to create now versus in the past, and they reuse and remake the same thing over and over. Well, look at the common denominators. You have like the Grand Theft Auto series, which is basically the Democrat Party platform. We saw it on full display in 2020. You know, Grand Theft Auto even did a day of like they shut off their lights. The video game company, they shut off their lights for the Black Lives Matter protesters, like in the middle of it all. Rockstar closes online games in support of BLM. GTA online players hold a virtual George Floyd memorial. There was something here. There was something where they had shut off their headquarters for a day or something. But look at the common denominators between the games. You have mostly first-person shooters, which has, I think, the agenda of, one, increasing the gun phobia on the left, and also gun fetishism, you know, making guns these all-powerful things. You're running around with a gun, shooting 50 people. And these first-person shooters are so unbelievable in the body counts, in just the accuracy, the feats that you're required to do to win these games. It kind of stretches the imagination a bit as far as like opening it up, Overton window, kind of making it seem like the stuff we see in the news is believable. Like some skinny 110-pound kid could shoot 30 people in 4 minutes in the head. You know, these are like video game stats. It's not real life. And then the other games are mostly about flying through space and shooting asteroids and landing on other planets. I mean, these themes are all to reinforce the dominant paradigm. Elephant Tusk says the video games keep the masses pacified, distracted, and programmed. Well, they're entertained. But what would you rather have them doing? And what are they being distracted from? That would be my question. I think it's an interesting question. It's kind of like, I don't agree with the elite, for one thing. I don't agree necessarily, but and I can understand their reasoning, I guess. You know, the bread and circuses, what's the point of it? Well, it's, in their view, it's probably necessary for the few to maintain control over the many, but also they perceive the masses to be an unruly, fickle mob that can't restrain its emotions or its consumption or its desires, and it needs to be regulated. That's what they've always used religion for. And mass media is just the newest religion, and video games are a huge part of it. It's immersive entertainment, and the fact that they're used to advance political agendas is kind of besides the point. And that's a generalization. I mean, not all games are like that necessarily. But we look at these things in context. Like, why was it on 10/6 Modern Warfare 3 comes out? And we consistently find in all the movies, in all the video games, predictive programming that aligns to the date. I mean, look at Westworld Season 3. You have multiple references to 3/11, pandemics. You have multiple things within the logos on a number of these movies that just, it's undeniable. Anyone who says predictive programming doesn't exist is an ignoramus that don't understand media. And those who say it's mere coincidences after coincidences, again, they're kind of in the same camp. This is an intentional and calculated method of implanting messages into the collective psyche consistently. And it's a nonstop barrage, and they've never stopped doing it. And they won't ever stop. We're just noticing it. But the problem is the truthers mystify it, whereas the normies deny it exists. It's like, no, it exists. Whether you like it or not, whether you understand it or not, it certainly does exist. All right, moving on. Now, I keep up with predictive programming by watching a lot of the movies and checking out the various games that are being played. And I just watched Roadhouse with Donnie Darko, or Jake Gyllenhaal. who plays Donnie Darko. And most of you know Donnie Darko is a movie that contains predictive programming for Donald Trump and 2020, which we won't get into all of that right now. It also had 9/11 predictive programming. Even in the advertisements, they had to change stuff because falling planes were a part of it. The director of Donnie Darko, by the way, his father worked for NASA on the Viking Mars missions. But what I saw in Roadhouse, like Donnie Darko, Jake Gyllenhaal has a life-changing moment when he confronts somebody named Frank. In Donnie Darko, it's a rabbit, Frank. In this movie, it's Frankie, a woman. But I was just looking to see if there's any kind of connections between that and this theme that we've been pointing out of actors carrying the same symbolism, the same roles, the same archetypes from movie to movie. Interestingly, his character is compared to some guy named Waco Wade, some character in a Western. And they emphasize the word Western a couple of times. And the Western is a book called Death at Double Cross. So Double Cross, the XX resurrection symbol. And of course, Waco Wade, there's some strangeness there. But another thing, Jake Gyllenhaal was recently discussing how he was being considered, and perhaps is still being considered, for the role of Batman. And Batman, in much of the symbolism, is also attached to Donald Trump. Then you have the Donald Trump head wound thing is kind of inferred in Donnie Darko, where Frankie the bunny takes off his mask and one of his eyes has got this grotesque wound. And interestingly, it looks exactly like this scene at the end of the movie where Jake Gyllenhaal's character emerges from a fight with one of his eyes bruised shut and the other one open, and it looks like this one eye symbolism, which again would reiterate this idea that Jake Gyllenhaal's his roles are part of this predictive programming narrative for Donald Trump and his world stage role upcoming as Antichrist with some kind of grotesque head wound that a lot of us have been looking forward to for a few years now. Now, the majority of the people on X who are talking about this particular theme, this next plot twist, are assuming it's going to be real. Just a heads up. And my assumption is that it's not. Okay, back to current news. P. Diddy's Los Angeles home raided by the government, and his sons King and Justin are in cuffs. With everything I say fake until proven real, but I'm not saying everything is fake. The way that everyone else says everything is real, unless you can prove it's fake. I say everything's fake until proven real, but specifically when it comes to extraordinary claims, not attended by evidence. Things that require a leap of faith, or, in other words, it has to be extraordinary. Normal things, maybe not, although they still may have some propaganda utility. But in this case, do I have any reason to doubt that P. Diddy is some kind of human trafficker and that this is some kind of a real situation? Not necessarily. Not if you look back at a lot of the rumors, the creepy stuff that being kind of said by various people. There are many insinuations there. So to me, this is not extraordinary. I'm not exactly suggesting this is all fake and theater. We shall see. But I'm not going to automatically say it's real. In other words, I don't know yet. I don't have enough information. I'm suspending judgment. That's what skepticism is. If you say you know, on what basis? Illusion Warfare. Les Luthor pointed this out again, that the movie Tenet has a lot of tie-ins to what just happened at the event. But he likes to point out that there's a lot of, quote, chicken feed, what he calls it. Chicken feed to keep the truther community involved and thinking that they're somehow part of the mystery van and they're trying to solve the crime. Like, oh no, the media is lying, but we can figure it out. Look at this. And so you have this people's media. And this is why Elon Musk said the other day, X is where media hoaxes go to die. Because the X is now acting as the alternative or the people's media that don't believe the mainstream, and they figure out the truth. And they're waking people up. But anyway, what he said here, He says the photographer is filming the whole thing, leaving chicken feed for the useful idiot community pecking. The useful idiot open source intel community. And open source intel. This is what QAnon was. The Nonner movement was really just a lot of people given a lot of chicken feed to pour over, to share. And it's been poured over, it's all been sorted through, and now it's being recycled. They clip off the dates so they can recycle a lot of these old memes and posts. It's pretty bad. Like, they're really at the bottom of the chicken feed barrel at the point where they're waiting for Barron Trump to grow up so they can worship him next. TMZ finally reported on the California man arrested after he was spotted eating a severed human leg. Didn't even cook it. It was not his fault. The train chopped off the leg. It wasn't him. Jair Bolsonaro, he's like the Brazilian Trump. He's facing investigation into his various criminal activities. These world stage characters become very obvious after a while, and you can see how they all serve the same roles. Nicotrama says Les Luthor is a god. Yeah, Les Luthor is legendary. His takes on events since Ukraine have been very useful, informative, and he's relentless. And more, he's coined the term illusion warfare. Because, like us, he's recognized that PSYOP is overused, the media hijacked it. Hoax is not an appropriate term. It suggests that somebody's tricking the media when they are, in fact, the hoaxers. And it's much more than just disparate events that bypass our filters. No, these are not hoaxes. Okay, let's see what else we have going through this Twitter feed. The Titanic door that Jack tragically couldn't fit has been auctioned for $718,000. I find these Titanic references interesting for a lot of reasons. We talked about the Titanic quite a lot last year. There's some fascinating connections with James Cameron, the Titanic, Avatar, and the theme of the sinking of the West. The West being represented as the Titanic, as it's a metaphor for hubris, too big to fail, but how this has been connected to the Twin Towers. The Twin Towers sinking has been correlated with the Titanic sinking through the work of James Cameron. And what's more, this has been further connected to this theme of climate chaos, and it's been expanded. In fact, I would say that James Cameron's Avatar movies were a way of reinvigorating the environmentalist movement and recreating the blue marble effect. If you didn't see Avatar 2 Way of Water, I described it as the new blue marble. And blue marble was when NASA goes out to space, 1972, they show us the world, and it creates the environmentalist movement because now they can see Gaia suspended in the abyss, being preyed upon by humans, in need of being saved from man. And so it changed our world. That was a worldview upgrade or update. Fake or not, it changed how we see the world. And so the Avatar 2 was more or less exactly the same thing. It shows you how the world is conscious, and that's where Gaia comes from. The idea that the world is a singular entity and it's aware, and you can tap into it. And so the movie was about Gaia consciousness and about how the West is a threat to the Earth, and it may actually kill Gaia. And then after this, so this is kind of interesting because the Way of Water is about this like Atlantis type group of Na'vi, the blue people, and they're fighting against the Marines, like these cops, basically these enforcers of the West and Western imperialism and capitalism, coming to their Pandora paradise to plunder, killing the indigenous people, and they're not connected to nature. And so this story of the Na'vi throwing off these soldiers with sticks and rocks was repeated in Atlanta at the Cop City protests, where the cops want to take 80 acres of forest and turn it into a training ground. The environmentalists fight them off with sticks and rocks. Just like the movie, you had this same dynamic. Anyway, we dissected this at length because they were merging BLM with environmentalists. In fact, there was a martyr, the individual who was killed by the police there, according to the autopsies, was shot through the palms of his hands. I mean, that's how you create a martyr. You crucify him. You make it look like he was crucified. But my point is that Cop City psyop and the protests that followed it were perfectly tied in with not only Avatar 2, Way of Water, Atlanta, Atlantis, all these connections, but also with the WEF talking about floods at the time. And my contention is that James Cameron would have been the director. Major League Metascriptor. And by the way, one of the things, just as a kind of, if you don't remember this, so it was Cameron who did Titanic, and this is why I mention him. He filmed Titanic, 1997. The movie comes out, and the Titanic breaks in two, and like the Twin Towers, it sinks, even has jumpers. Well, later we see this movie called Don't Look Up, which has Leonardo DiCaprio, and he's warning the scientists, or trying to tell the greedy capitalists, hey, we got to stop what we're doing. We got to deflect the comet before it kills us. And these guys are like, no, we want to mine the thing for money. So Leonardo DiCaprio is warning everybody about this incoming space iceberg that's going to sink the Earth. And of course, the Earth loses. But they chose him because of his correlation to his role in the Titanic and the sinking of the Titanic. So Don't Look Up and the Titanic are linked by Leonardo DiCaprio, chosen for this very reason, though, because they're trying to correlate the idea of the sinking of the Titanic with the sinking of the West, with the sinking of Gaia itself, the destruction of the world. One more thing. On 9/11, 2001, the director of the Titanic was actually at the wreckage of the Titanic. James Cameron was at the scene of the Titanic on 9/11, filming a documentary called Ghosts in the Abyss, which has an interesting connection if you think about the term abyss. Ghosts in the Abyss, he's down there filming the Titanic. Titanic's correlated with the Twin Towers, and Revelation 9/11 talks about the abyss, the beast or the destroyer in the abyss, which has a lot more connections we can get into. The destroyer in the abyss seems to be related to what Cameron presented in Terminator 2, which is the nuke. And of course, Terminator, Apollyon, Abaddon, these are all alternate names or terms for Revelation 9/11's thing in the abyss, whatever it's going to be. That I think it's whatever is going to bring down the West, and I think it symbolizes the nuke. And then fascinatingly, this whole Revelation 9/11 has been connected to Donald Trump. Another kind of tangent, but I'm just mentioning DiCaprio, Titanic in the news. I tend to notice these things because they are important pieces, in this bigger script. This is where it's at. It says so many people getting locked up on the new Diddy law. Skyfish, Tim, I just barely saw all this ISIS Russia event, fake until proven real, very hoaxy. Oh yes, there a few key points about it. There was a drill before. There was a warning by the State Department 2 weeks before, very specific. There was a lot of buildup, in other words. Then you have the usual stuff. Was it ISIS? Was it an inside job? Did Putin cause it? So you have this hallmarks of it being, basically a hoax. Aside from what you see itself, if you find any of it convincing, then you're easily convinced. There's really nothing there. But like every other event, we've taken it apart, and it just seems to have all the boxes checked. And someone went and they checked the Yelp's reviews, and they found no one's parked there. No one's put any reviews there in a couple of years, like 5 years. I tend to think it was a closed movie set. And then the other aspect of it, it's on 322. And there's more when you get into the predictive programming and symbolism and stuff. There's more stuff connecting this Crocus concert hall to, well, I'll see if I can find some of it. Foreshadowing. I mean, this is like a 9/11 level event for them. Brother Berg posted this. The infamous Call of Duty level No Russian, where the player goes as an undercover, he's an undercover CIA asset. So Call of Duty, you play an undercover CIA asset, and you're taking part in a massacre at an airport in Moscow. So again, this is another thing that draws heavy parallels to the Crocus City Hall attacks. Let's see, this is where it's at. It says, I can't spell tonight. Gyllenhaal played Mysterio in a Spider-Man movie. Mysterio was an illusionist who deceived the world. Fascinating. Yeah, so here's what I'm bringing, what I mentioned, this Donnie Darko and Jake Gyllenhaal. It's simply this. We're looking at the body of predictive programming as repetition in media to prepare us for singular events to be presented down the line. And Donald Trump has been well represented in predictive programming going back 60 years. He's been foreshadowed before he even grew up, like Musk and like many others we can point to. These are world stage personages. And many of the ways, or one of the ways that they are able to build this composite is they have many different actors who may carry certain aspects of that person and their future role in a movie. For example, Full Metal Jacket, the character Joker is templated off of JFK. And there's a lot we can go into there. But, the guy with the target on the side of his head, Joker, JFK, war photographer. JFK was a war photographer. Fascinating connections with the William Randolph Hearst, with the Hearst family. But my point of it is, the actor Matthew Modine, therefore, Joker, has this connection to JFK, and so we're looking at these actors and other roles they have played moving into the future, and do they have similar connotations? So in this specific case, Donnie Darko, Donald Trump connections. Donnie Darko, if he does the Batman role, would be another strong connection. But in this movie too, the one eye symbolism, where he ends the movie with one of his eyes beaten closed and the other one is wide open. And of course his character is connected to somebody named Waco Wade. In Waco, where Trump kicked off his campaign, he said last battle, Armageddon, Waco. Waco, where you had this guy, 33-year-old, incinerated by the ATF, believed he was Jesus Christ, and so did his followers. Waco Wade, in a book called Death at Double Cross. That's the character that was being compared to to Jake Gyllenhaal's character in Roadhouse. Well, Death at Double Cross, obviously, Double Cross has a great deal of symbolism. We're talking about, the X is a cross. XX is a double cross, symbol of resurrection. Back on 4/4 last year, because we're approaching it again. 4/4 last year was when Donald Trump was arraigned, when he was arrested. And, he sold the jacket he was wearing. They chopped it into pieces and auctioned it, kind of like was done with Jesus's garments. And Trump has compared himself to Jesus multiple times, even today. But last year on 4/4, Heath Ledger, the Joker, would have turned 44. But that was the day he was arraigned. It was the 55th anniversary of Martin Luther King's assassination. And coincidentally, outside that courthouse, Joker 2 was being filmed. Again, Joker 2, Double Cross, Resurrection, Heath Ledger turning 44 on 4/4. 4 is another cross. X is a cross. The 4 is a cross. The T is a cross. You can see the ways that various symbols can be represented in kind of covert ways, but when you see their repeatedly used code, it becomes easy to discern it. I'm going through your comments here. All right, let's move on. This is where it's asked, says Jake Paul versus Tyson. There has to be some symbolism there. Elephant Tusk says, I think the X symbolism has everything to do with Planet X visibility. Okay, now let's talk about the X symbolism, because we're getting close to 4/8, and America gets X'd. That was foreshadowed in Leave the World Behind. And Leave the World Behind is a perfect example of how predictive programming is all political. It's all geared towards the world stage. It's not mystical. It's not done by anything more than Democrats and Republicans. It's done to maintain the info war. It's done to maintain the mind war and the dialectics, to keep people on these sides. But that movie has the big X, and so the advent of X, Elon Musk's X, is also very significant here because the X is a cross, and Musk is on the world stage. I call him Pope Elon because he's basically reprising the role of Constantine in several ways. Specifically, though, Constantine had a vision of a glowing cross, and he said, "Under the sign, I'll unite the empire." And Musk similarly put the X on Twitter headquarters, and it was glowing. And this was last year during the dog days of summer. He said, "Blaze your glory." The dog star is called the blazing star. We have this blazing cross. And I thought, this is like prophecy coming true, because in 2017 I put out an article called "Elon Musk, the Martian Pope," explaining how he was characterized, or he was portraying sort of this new Constantine, whose role it is to, consolidate a new Bible, put us into our fiefdoms, feudalism. Well, space communism is feudalism. There's no other way to describe it. It's a closed system. You can't leave. You don't have any private property. Space communism, lunar bases, Mars bases. And this has been the blueprint since the early Russian rocket pioneers, who openly endorsed a communist base on Mars to show us how it's done. And then you do it here on Earth. So that's always been the goal. One of these early space pioneers, his name was Constantine, interestingly. But when Musk put the X on the building, he said X would be the everything app. And I take this to mean the consolidation of everything, so they can censor, so they can filter, so they can get rid of non-canonical texts, get rid of the Apocrypha, get rid of heresy, get rid of anything that doesn't comport with the state-sanctioned worldview. And that state-sanctioned worldview should lead people into the new system of feudalism. It should basically say, hey, we have to get rid of everything that says space is fake. They're not going to ship us off to the Mars bases, and Musk wants to put a million people on Mars. So Mars needs to be populated, so they can't have non-believers represented on the world stage media. So of course they got to censor that. I often describe the mass media as the world state's de facto church, and the screen, that little black monolith in your pocket, is the Bible. But it's not yet consolidated, and it's not yet purified. They're still in the process of censoring it up. Elephant Tusk says, supposedly the X eclipse will make planet X visible to the masses. And he says, all these contrails block a lot of visibility. Well, the X's in the sky that you see from condensation trails are based on flight paths. Kind of like how you have intersections on the road. It's not any more complicated than that. But you are right about this, the repeated X stuff. And there's just a few examples here. We just barely got into it. But there is something going on the 8th that's really emphasizing this. But is it going to lead to something? I don't know. I'm not inclined to believe that anybody here is able to predict the future, and that any of these prophets online are accurate. I think there's a methodology to making it look like they're able to predict the future. And I'm looking forward to 4.8 simply to call them out. I'm going to take a list of, let's say, 10 of the most popular Twitter prophets who say that Armageddon begins on 4.8. And if they're all wrong, I'm going to call them out one by one and just ask them to explain their methodology, because I believe that we do see patterns. We do have plenty of suggestions of highly controlled media, but people go overboard when they take out the gematria calculators, when they start putting arbitrary values in until they make it fit, and then they build their case based on all these hits that they found, and they draw a target around it, like, look, I hit bullseyes. It's like, well, no, actually, you made it appear like you did. But those types of things aren't necessary to make the case that we're making, but rather they distract from it, because we're merely pointing out the use of propaganda and mind control. by man to control man. The internet prophets using gematria calculators claiming that the world's about to end are actually suggesting that these coincidences are far too voluminous to have been conceived of by man. They're too random. It's too hard to believe that it's nothing. It could be less than a higher power doing it. And that's not the right answer, but they're obfuscating the truth. Or I'm wrong, and on the 8th of April, the sun's going to blot out forever. Internet's going to be cut off. Aliens are going to descend. Antichrist emerges, or whatever they say is going to happen. Earthquakes. We're all going to get sucked up into the sky. What is supposed to happen? And a literalist says true earthers are going to boil vinegar during the eclipse in April to clean away the chemtrails. Armin Ree says, do you think the eclipse will follow that path, or is it a ruse? Will people be able to verify it? This is going to be probably the most viewed eclipse of all time. There's going to be people viewing it all along the line of totality. That's why they're shutting down schools. They have the National Guard out. Elephant Tusk says it's very clear they want a second pandemic, and to that I'm going to say no. They will not do it because it wouldn't work. They're preparing us for Fallout. I mean, haven't you watched Amazon? Fallout's about to come out. If you want to know what's going to happen in the future, you got to watch Netflix or Amazon. Netflix, of course, co-founder, first CEO, related to Edward Bernays, Sigmund Freud. So no, they're not going to do that again. They use that to train you so you know how to be a good locked down citizen. But no, it's going to be Fallout. And Fallout won't be so easy to politicize. You know, the other thing, it was like if you're on the left, you obey. If you're on the right, you're going to resist. But no one's going to resist Fallout. They're going to say, okay, I'm staying inside. This is where it's at. Says the only thing that will happen on the 8th is nothing. The 9th will come. And some folks about to eat double nothing burgers. Emerald Bear says the end of the world is the start of another world, not the literal end, just the end of a world era. Correct. Exactly. I want to say congratulations to everyone here because you survived the end of the world. It ended on 12/21/2020. Winter solstice, Christmas star, Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, the likes of which we haven't seen since Jesus was born. So we had a reset. That was our year zero. We actually started over. The world ended, and we are in the new age. That's why we have all the talk of the Great Reset and the Great Awakening. You notice that the left wants a Great Reset, the right wants the Great Awakening. They're both asking for the same thing. They both promise the same thing. It's the same type of idealism, or utopianism rather. Although the left is like, we want this future transhumanist scientism-based utopia. And the right is like, no, we want traditional values, good old days, traditionalism, idealized past utopia. FMGR says, I tuned in to the Truth Mafia podcast the other day. Had to give them a thumbs down when one of the hosts suggested that chemtrails are there to block communications with your spirit guides. Right. See, this is a problem. I call it a philosophical crisis. It's a problem. The problem is simply that we are looking at influencers and big channels who are still falling for basic logical fallacies that are, I think, planted there to make you look uncredible. You know, they always say, the truthers are always like, you guys calling stuff fake are making us, you're causing us to lose credibility with the mainstream. It's like, I don't want credibility with the mainstream. They don't have credibility with me. But the fear-based chemtrail story, it's at this point it's a little old, and if you're still kind of carrying that around, I'm going to have to ask you, why aren't you doing something about it? Or do chemtrails make you apathetic? Maybe that's what they do. Because if somebody was dumping their litter boxes in my backyard, I would call the cops. I would knock on their door. That's a little more concrete. Now, if somebody was spraying poisons in my yard, yeah, I would do the same thing. Just because it's a plane a few thousand feet above your head doesn't mean you shouldn't take action. So, at what point do you take action? Has your responsibility been diffused? Are there not at least 10 or 15 chemtrail truthers who can do a lawsuit? I would lead this lawsuit if I had 19 chemtrail believers. I'm a non-believer, but I would do it for you. If I can get 19 of you to show any kind of initiative or agency, does it turn you into NPCs? Yeah, call cops on chemtrails. I got somebody to do it once. I did have someone he was in Canada, and I was like, I don't want to hear about it unless you're going to call the cops. He called the Mounties. I don't know if they swatted him. Never heard from him since, but yeah, I managed to get somebody to do it. Elephant Tusk says, New Age is serious disinfo psyop. No, New Age is a Masonic thing. Before there was a New Age movement. And the New Age is intrinsic to our present age, scientism. I mentioned the Russian rocket pioneers. They were believers in what they would call cosmism. And Russian cosmism was kind of like theosophy and panpsychism, the idea of this intelligent universe and mankind becoming a multiplanetary species. I actually wanted to spend some time talking about the early days of the space program in Russia because it mirrors Jack Parsons. Jack Parsons, L. Ron Hubbard, science fictionizing Mystery Babylon. Well, the Russian rocket pioneers were tapping into something very similar. In fact, it has its roots even in theosophy. So from the very beginning, the space program has been a religious paradigm. From the beginning, it has been attached to this New Ageism, which is ultimately tied into the precession of the equinoxes and the age of Aquarius. And we're in the age of Aquarius, the information age. The water being flooded symbolizes, or the water being poured out by Aquarius, it represents information, it represents wisdom. That's why I call this a sea of irrelevance, because we do have the information age upon us, but we're also being flooded with dis, mis, and malinformation as well, which is all there intentionally to drown it out. But there's more, because I have been saying, and I wrote a book on this called A Secret Religion of the Elite, that they have science fictionized Mystery Babylon. Well, listen to this. Russian cosmism, alien visitations and cosmic energies in contemporary Russia. In this article, it talks about how the Russian cosmism movement was about creating a scientific equivalent for these archaic concepts. So, for example, I've mentioned that aliens are the scientific equivalent of angels. Here's an excerpt from an article about it. Although Russian cosmism is an all-encompassing movement combining elements of theosophy, philosophy, and evolution, astrology, even science fiction, this article focuses on its cosmic topics. But again, science fiction is a part of it. Look at Elon Musk, who literally stepped out of the pages of Mars, a technical tale by Werner von Braun. But again, it goes on here. A special feature of cosmism was the attempt to discover scientific equivalents to investigations previously characterized as esoteric or occult. Jack Parsons, occultist. He hangs out with L. Ron Hubbard, science fiction writer. And what do? They provide a scientific cover for what is the esoteric, the occult. I've been saying, and this is what first clued me in, I started to recognize that these rocket launches are actually totally related to these fertility rites, that is in fact an obelisk. Scientific equivalents to esoteric, rockets to space, obelisk resurrection symbol, digital transcendence, using science to mask Mystery Babylon. Here's an article, The Spiritual Geography of Russian Cosmism. And one of the leading minds in this thing is a guy named Constantine, who has been quoted by Elon Musk when he talks about becoming multiplanetary. So there's another Constantine, associated with Musk. Main themes in cosmist thought include the active human role in cosmic evolution, creation of new life forms, a new level of humanity, unlimited extension of human longevity to a state of immortality, physical resurrection of the dead. Now, there's a series of books by Elon Musk's first wife, Justine Musk, that have a lot to do with these ideas of, I guess, clones, but also of physical immortality by having one's body transported into these new clones. Fascinating stuff. Here's a tweet where Elon Musk said, "Blimps rock," and I superimpose over it Starship. My contention is that Starship is a blimp, that it's a rigid airship. Now, this is also very interesting. I mentioned Constantine. Well, Constantine studied the mechanics of lighter than air powered flying machines, and he first proposed all metal dirigibles, and he built models. So these rigid metal airships, and you can find these on Wikipedia, you can find some pictures. Here's Constantine with his steel dirigibles. This is in 1913. So what are these? These are like metal cylindrical blimps that can be steered. He called them controllable metallic balloons. Gave a scientific and technical rationale for the design of an airship with a metal sheath. What was interesting about this is that he did not receive any kind of funding for it. No monetary support, no recognition, no moral support. So I'm like, wait, did these just get scrapped? He went to an aeronautics congress in St. Petersburg, and he got a lukewarm response. These were discontinued. So I'm like, wait a minute here. Did they discontinue these, or did these become the basis for faking rockets going to space? And that's what I would say. That this is how they fake rockets. They're using steel dirigibles. And that's what Starship is. It's not what they say it is. They blow them up just to trick you, to make you think it's something that it's not. Sort of like how Loon X became Starlink satellites. You know, Sataloons. Yeah, Sataloons to deliver internet, very effective. Yet, for some reason, they didn't make any money. But then, all of a sudden, Starlink shows up. I think there's a connection here. Space communism, a new workers' paradise, sold to the capitalists. Pretty ingenious if you think about it. But yeah, he believed that colonizing space would lead to the perfection of the human species, giving them immortality and a carefree existence. Quite a sales pitch for slavery for a gulag on Mars, where you're expected to donate your own blood to mix with the soil to build bricks. All right, let me go through your comments. This is where it's at. It says, I like post-apocalypse movies. It'd be cool to live in a world where I'm not governed. Yeah, I've noticed that there's a lot of movies that glorify the post-apocalyptic existence that it seems like it'd be a little bit of fun, but I think when you get down to it, I mean, if you've been camping for a few days, you know that things fall apart pretty quickly. All right, want to say thanks everyone for joining. We'll start earlier tomorrow. I have to run, but the 24/7 live stream is being continually updated. I'm adding some of the new tracks, some of these ones that we played tonight, and I'll be adding more and more material from this website, which is, again, it's suno.ai, and we use this to create music. I have a few examples I posted on my website. I'll post a link in Gilded as well. We'll follow up on the story of P. Diddy if anybody's interested in it. I'm not sure, again, fake until proven real. If it's an extraordinary claim, I don't find any of it all that surprising or unbelievable. Yeah, this is where it's at. It says country music on my YouTube feed. Yeah, I know. I did do a country music song. I should just play that song really quick for anyone who missed it, or I'll put a link in the chat. It's actually good, and I don't even like country. And I'm pretty sure this is better than, Beyonce's country. This is Tears on the Big Screen. And I'm going to turn this back on over to 24/7.
through the channels trying to find some peace, but I can't escape the sorrow that fills the room as I watch them actors cry on that big screen. They're just playing pretend, but it feels so real. The tears, they flow like rivers in the rain, but it cuts deep inside. It's a bittersweet pain, knowing their hurt ain't real, but mine ain't fake. They're just acting on that stage, trying to earn their fame. But here I am in my living room, feeling the pain. Tears on the big screen, they make me feel so alone. I guess I'll keep watching and crying, just like the actors on my TV's whoa.
Election in Russia, winning 87% of the vote, securing his position in power till 2030 and beyond. We've been talking about the bloodbath prophecies for 4/8, Kate Middleton and King Charles's deaths, which were both, of course, not deaths. We are also kind of breaking down the dynamics within Trutherville, what's causing it to break down, how it's been targeted by what I consider to be active measures, meant to erode its capacity to discern real from fake. Now, I was looking at this true believer in space, Dave Willis, and he says, what's all this criticism of Boeing about their planes? Because look at their space flight stuff. And he's showing how Boeing in space is really just killing it, that they have all the best tech out there and there's no issues out there with DEI. But they're showing this picture of Starliner, some kind of a capsule floating above the Earth, and talking about this thing. And I asked one of them, what movie is this from? Because it looks like a movie prop. It doesn't look real. It literally looks like a science fiction movie. And Dave Willis says, this is from real life, when Starliner visited the ISS. So I'm looking at this image closely, and this is, of course, supposed to be in outer space. And the people who believe this stuff don't even question it. But I was looking at the Earth below, and I'm still not certain that NASA has quit this technique of creating the ball Earth by recording the sky and then inverting the video. And you can do this yourself. Record the sky, lay on the ground, record the sky, invert your camera. And if you don't get any background from the trees or buildings, you just get the sky and the clouds, you can kind of create what looks to be the Earth as supposedly seen from a couple hundred miles above. Now, we actually have an example. I have a video I could show of a space shuttle dropping its fuel tank. But when you look at the fuel tank carefully, you realize it's not falling to the Earth. It's a blimp, and it's floating into the clouds. And that beyond the clouds, that sky, is being presented as the ocean. Optical illusions. But anyway, I would never debate the nature of the world with someone who thinks this is real, because this person has accepted the authority of the screen. To them, this is scientific evidence. And I don't think that it is. In fact, I was looking at this concept of admissibility as evidence in the court of law when it comes to video or photography. And you could argue that this is not evidence unless you have something else to substantiate it. You would need who recorded it, when. You can't just take an image out of context and say it's real. You can, but you risk reality impairment, which is where most people are right now. They are reality impaired. They cannot tell the difference between real and fake. But there's no point in debating them, obviously. So Fight the Flat Earth, who's a major league glurf, has been gloating for days about this latest Starship trip, which looks very cartoony, and he's mocking flat earthers as a bunch of crybabies crying, shedding tears because they've had their hopes and dreams destroyed. So I took his cartoon image of crying flat earthers and I asked him to, basically explain, is this real or fake? I said, I don't think this is an actual photo, but it looks so real it must be fake, which is what Musk said after Starman went into space or fake space. But look at this picture. You would say, obviously, that's CGI. Obviously, that's AI generated art. It's not real. But qualitatively, it's actually no faker than what SpaceX just showed us. It's no different. So whenever somebody shows you something from space, like, oh, look, starships in space, you can ask them, what movie is this from? You don't have to assume it to be real. Cole Anchor says, if you can't debate the people who are brainwashed, what can you do? Here's what you can do. Here's what we're doing. I'm saying just go past Normieville, skip Woketown, and we're going to blow up Trutherville first. The whole point of this think tank is let's aggregate the people who've already unbrainwashed themselves. It has to be done at the level of the individual. You can't pull people out of their matrix pods. They have to do it themselves. But it turns out that there are a lot of us. There are a lot of people who have figured out the level of skepticism required to maintain sanity in the insane world. But there's no platform for sane people. You got to hang out with the woke who are depressed and angry, or the red pill who are having nightmares, or they're high on hopium, or you can go hang out with the sleepers in the middle. But there's no platform for sane people who aren't apathetic. You see, the people in the middle, they believe everything, but they're apathetic about it. That's why you can't relate to them. They believe the world's going to end. They believe that babies are having their heads chopped off over there. They believe all the mass shootings, but they don't care. So it's hard to relate to that kind of apathy. But what we have here is completely different. We have an informed demographic of media skeptics who aren't falling for any of this stuff, who suspend judgment so we're not caught up in the 24/7 news cycles. We're constantly being flooded with stuff to just accept as real, which we don't. The objective here is we send out a signal, a penguin projected onto the ionosphere, or a book tour, and this signal will help us. This mission is to aggregate everybody who's already stepped out of the box, who is on the right side of the screen. And I believe that there are enough of us that we have this sizable breakaway, what I call the parallel media. And once we aggregate a good 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10,000, it'll snowball. And people who are near the fringes, who are being gate kept, will eventually see through that, in my opinion. Now, once we have that established, then we can decide what to do next. But you're not going to make any progress fighting an info war, because the info war is two-sided and it's actually designed to never end. The only way to win is to step off their stage. Conscientious objection. We're a bunch of peaceniks here, inactivists. But this platform is growing. I mean, this think tank has been going on since 2017, despite the best efforts of the powers that be to shut it down. I mean, personal stalkers, unfair business practices, harassment, all the stuff they've done has only made us better at what we do, less censorable. We've evolved. But I feel like there's a vacuum, because objectivism, the philosophy of objectivism, and even some areas of atheism where people are thinking deeply about how they can claim to know something and have these knowledge claims, and do they just say, my mind's inadequate to know, so I'm just going to go with what the guy in the costume says, the guy in the smock, the guy in the clergy garments. No, there's principled objection to various belief systems that are being pro-offered by religions and governments. But the people who would be objectors to these don't have any sort of platform, because if you look at it, anybody who's leaned towards atheism, and I'm not saying that I advocate atheism or I'm in denial of spirituality, but I'm saying the people who even go that way have a reason for it because their critical thinking is being challenged by these authorities. So they want to challenge it back. However, the whole school of atheist thought has been pulled into scientism. So they've lost the plot. They didn't arrive at any higher insights at all. They've just been given a replacement religion and a new God construct to replace the old one. No different. So it doesn't go to any kind of higher sense of awareness. In fact, it puts them back in the dark age. They're on the same sheet as the religious that they criticize. But then the objectivists, for example, they believe that there's too much collectivism, not enough focus on individualism, individual perception, cognition, epistemology, and the philosophies of the world have been inadequate to handle the task of man reaching his highest capacity as an intellectual. And the problem with objectivism is they took the televised worldview as objective. So the objectivists are all cheering for Apollo 11 and they're treating everything in the news as absolutely real. Well, I'm sorry, but the instant you step through that screen, you have become a subjectivist. Just as the instant you pick up a holy book and you accept it as automatically real, whatever you read in there, yeah, you've become an auto believer, you've become a subjectivist. You've lost or you've given up your claim to existing in an entirely objective reality. So these groups, this is a large segment of the population is underserved. There's a vacuum. Where do the thinkers go in a world of believers? Where do the seekers go? And this is what I'm saying is that there isn't a place, they are being gate kept, and those who go too far are maligned, attacked, ignored, etc. So this is why we are doing our own thing. And when we have the numbers, this is what the plan is. Because it's not about me. I'm one person, but the demographic I'm talking about is huge, and there are many content creators there. So we get all these content creators on the same sheet with their audiences, and it becomes a little more powerful. I think a little more unignorable. And then we can set about the next stage, the next process. But again, I break the world down into the off-world stage and the world stage. The world stage is the mainstream, the alternative, which consists of course, Normieville, Trutherville, and Woketown. And we have no business messing with Woketown because they're married to big government. They're the most brainwashed of all. We're not trying to wake up Normieville because they don't want to wake up. They're too apathetic. The only people worth reaching out to, in my opinion, are those in Trutherville. And a lot of them are exasperated, like that individual I played a few minutes ago who was ranting. They're tired of the active measures, of the irrelevance, of the false prophets. And so those who want an objective perspective of the world without their intelligence being insulted by psyops and crisis actors and fake news will finally have a platform here very soon. Yeah, if you want to call in, phones are open 505 349 0420. I didn't have anything particular on the agenda to discuss today other than the bloodbaths. We're having a bloodbath of bloodbaths. Infinite Plane Radio.
Yellow.
Hey, is this Cole?
Yeah, what's up? Is this Tim?
Yeah, thank you for calling. What is on your mind? You said you have a few interesting things.
Yeah. So, I've been digging into this kind of, this rabbit hole of stuff, and there's a rapper called Dr. Creep who predicted the COVID 19 or whatever. He predicted the pandemic in one of his audios.
Okay, I saw you had mentioned Dr. Creep and I looked him up. I wasn't sure what exactly he had done. So you said that he had predicted that there would be the 2020 thing.
Yeah, so it's not even like a prediction. So it's a video. Look up if you can real quick. It's called Pandemic. It was made in 2013. He talks about vaccines being like a hoax, like a scare. And one of the lines is COVID-19 mixed with 2020. And I guess it just got swept under the rug because no one heard about it.
Okay, I see it here. And I will put a link
Yeah.
I'll put a link to it in the chat so people can check it out. But I have found Dr. Creep.
Breaking Benjamin.
Very interesting.
And Yeah, and it's just
If you're
there's
a
like a
pet
whole
owner,
rabbit
these
hole. So his name is based off a radio guy, like a radio talk show host, who also, you know, push towards our same agenda. Like, you guys are just lying, and we know exactly who you are. This guy, he was super funny. He dressed up as like a clown. But yeah, it's just there's a whole rabbit hole. He had a talk show in like the 1990s or something.
Okay, I'm looking at that video, and in the comments section, a number of people are pointing out that this song predicted COVID-19. Fascinating.
Yeah, yeah. One of the lines is literally COVID-19 mixed with 2020, and this. So I've been listening to this music. So I guess this is what true underground hip hop is, like what people would call it. But all the videos, all of, like the other videos he has, only have like 100 to 200 views. They're good. They're very good songs, and they all talk about uh literally what we talk about. Just one new world order. Um, I'm sure you heard of the Garden plot, right? The Garden plot.
Remind me, what is that exactly?
So I don't know. The Garden plot is just one of like the many things involving the New World Order. But yeah, I think um you could like just look into that type of stuff. There's also something else, Almond Hut Productions, Almond Hut. I can give you links to this type of stuff later if you want.
Okay, I found that one. So the Department of Defense Civil Disturbance Plan, or Garden Plot. Army National Guard plan to respond to major domestic civil disturbances in the United States. Okay. Now, where was the Garden Plot in 2020 when BLM was engaging in peaceful protests?
Yeah, I guess it just wasn't there, but there's just one of his songs from like earlier on. It was just diving in. He also has a song about Project Bluebeam, and it doesn't have that much views, so I guess that hasn't got released yet. But yeah, it's kind of crazy. Like these people, if you look at the post about it, like he answers questions from people like, "How did you find this out? Like, are you time travel or whatever?" And his answers are literally, "No, you just have to look through media." Or something like he said something about, yeah, it's all I just made it with connections and scrolling through media, quote unquote. You can't do the shit through scrolling through hours on Google. You have to like make connections and stuff.
Interesting, interesting. See, that's what we do here.
And then
We're reading
yeah, and this
the
guy was from
zeitgeist.
yeah, and it's kind of crazy. This guy's from 2013, and all of this stuff just got pushed under the carpet. It's like it's not even like about the agenda or whatever. The music is great. All of the music revolving around that type of stuff is great, and it just has no views or anything.
Fascinating. Yeah, I'm looking at the comments. People are pretty blown away by this. So I will be putting this in the newsletter for people to check it out. And using predictive programming as a predictive model is what we do here because we're recognizing that that's
Yeah, yeah,
part of.
yeah. That's what I originally wanted to say. That's what he said he did. Just predictive programming. Literally COVID-19 mixed with 2020 in a song from 2013, and I think it's just something interesting to look at.
Good find, good find. And we're always looking at artists, musicians, and movies. I mean, sometimes I don't even use the term predictive. Sometimes it's concurrent programming, like it's real time. Like next month,
Yeah.
Fallout. I think Fallout from Amazon's coming out. So we have all this talk about nukes. Well, now we're getting a mass education into what Fallout is. Nobody knew about pandemics to the extent that they did until 2019 when Netflix started putting out like documentaries on it, etc. They flood the zone. And we are being prepared for fallout. So everybody's going to get educated on nuclear biological decontamination processes for fallout from high altitude detonations. Coming soon.
So what you're saying right now is they're preparing us for a nuclear thing or like
Yes.
another pandemic.
Oh no, no. They're definitely they did the pandemic to teach us how to lock down, to train us, but the next I think the next thing that's going to be used as an excuse for a lockdown is going to be fallout. And it'll be much harder to resist lockdowns for that. But it's the same procedures. It's just a different contaminant. But fallout is also invisible, and it's there if they say it's there. So it's a very similar dynamic.
Okay, so they're just going to use nukes as a way, to keep us in.
Exactly. Exactly. And they could say, because of the weather, because of the winds, because of the climate, this section of America is going to be hit with this much radiation, so don't leave your house. Like that's kind of where it would be similar. It'd be an excuse for
That
lockdowns.
so that yeah, yeah.
In fact, in
That
2019,
makes
there's a movie called The Humanity Bureau with Nicolas Cage, and it's about everybody
mhm.
locked down because there was a nuclear war and you can't leave because radiation. And you find out at the end of the movie that they lied and that everybody was locked down for no reason. Kind of funny.
Oh, that's so funny. Who was it produced by? Like this?
It's Nicolas Cage's. It's called The Humanity Bureau, and it came out in 2017. Dystopian thriller. Let me see who directed it. Interesting movie though. It's actually pretty decent. But yeah, near
Yeah, I'd
future,
imagine some.
lockdown for no reason, and it was by Mind's Eye Entertainment.
Yeah, that's so funny, dude. But yeah, I'd imagine that's just some sort of predictive programming,
Yep.
like most of it. It's kind of like I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of just scary being in this different, like being outside of the bubble, cause it like being like my age, it's just like I go to school with these kids, and they're all just like sitting there, you know, just buying into it. And I have talks and stuff. I go to parties and stuff, but it's just hard to have like a conversation about it. Because as soon as I bring it up, I'm just like, hey, by the way, have you checked this up? And then they're just like, yeah, that's a coincidence. Or are you crazy or something? Like, no, the vaccines are real or whatever. Like,
Their
nukes are
programming
real, space
is,
is real.
yeah, it's like you risk being alienated. And then the way the media has contaminated the area, oh, if you ask these questions, now you are possibly a Nazi, possibly a racist. So they can cause you to lose all your friends, lose your social status. They make it very painful to even have these
Well, it's
concepts and
not
ideas.
even like it's not even that. Like I'm a cool guy and stuff. It's just like it's just like they're helpless. It's over, you know?
They're in,
Like
yeah,
not
it,
a
it's
yeah, yeah.
a
It's just
box.
hard to see.
It's hard to see, literally. They're in a box, as in they've accepted the screen as an authority, so that's their frame of reference. And your frame of reference includes the possibility that the screen is lying, whether it's telling you a lie or if it's selectively presenting a view that excludes stuff that you ought to know. So, in other words, when you stepped away from the screen as an objective source, as an authority, you actually stepped out of their box and you can't see when you're in the box, you can't see what it looks like as such. You don't see the model that you're in. And I've dealt with this for a
Yeah,
long
yeah.
time, and
That's
it's
like this. It's like the saying. It's harder. I think it's like it was about fooling someone. It's harder to unfool someone than it is to fool someone.
oh yeah, definitely. It's
Yeah.
easier to fool a man than convince him he's been fooled, and that's because their emotions and their ego get tied into it, and of course consensus. The power of the consensus to hold reality down is also what you're fighting up against.
So have you done any like digging into who's in control, like who like the main source of all this is, like which rich families or whatever?
I find that a lot of the people who point at rich families or certain nations or ethnicities, they fall short of the bigger truths because those explanations presuppose that everything is real. So all I can tell is that whoever is behind it, it's not one nation. In other words, government is already global. We say governments, we
Yeah,
say
yeah. It's
nations, but it's
definitely not like one. It's not like a country, but like I'm talking about like just all. I found a I found a pretty good documentary or two. Just it connects like everything, like the everything with Bush, everything with 9/11, everything with just selective programming or whatever. It just predicts all of it. It's like a pretty old video. It even connects like biblical characters from uh Christian, like the book Bible or whatever, the Bible, and even the Jew Bible or whatever, the Jewish Bible. But yeah, it's a documentary connecting those two true Egyptian like findings.
send it my way. What
And
we can say for sure, whoever's
yes,
in control of it
yes,
now,
100%.
like let's say whoever's at the capstone level of this thing, they didn't make it. The people who are in control inherited this thing.
Yeah,
They
they
were
didn't make it now. Like even the video I watched says no, it just goes back to history. Like they just been this ring, the ring of power. The documentary is literally called the Ring of
okay.
Power. This
Well,
ring of power has been going back for years.
one thing
But
I focus on.
I don't 100%.
Well,
Yeah,
it may lead you somewhere though, because I don't think you can assess this stuff without looking at the past. Because, like, I look at the symbolism of the space program, and the point of it is like we're looking at ancient symbolism dressed up with science fiction terminology. So you have an obelisk updated as a rocket. So I look back, well, what were these ancient worldviews about? Who was this? And you trace it back, and all the mystery schools go back, Egypt or whatever, and you're like, well, whatever it is, this control system is ancient, but it's being updated. And it's not new. They didn't just take over the media. The media is replacing religion. And the same people who created the religions to control everyone's minds are in control of media. So there's a lineage here, and I find
yeah,
that to
yeah.
be
This
interesting.
will be our one world religion. We will look up to them, and I I don't know what happened in the past, and I don't know what they're up to now. But what I think is going to happen is it's just going to get to the point they're going to strip our guns away. They're going to strip our jobs away. They're going to strip our most of our rights away. And this will just be everywhere, not just the United States. This will just be everywhere. And after they do that, we're just going to, be working for them the whole time. Like I was listening to one of your podcasts earlier. We're just going to be little Oompa Loompas, as you called it.
Yeah, Oompa Loompas with Emperor Pope Elon in his Mars
Yep,
base,
yep.
and neo-feudalism. And I think that is the objective here. But it's not like they're going to have to force everybody physically, because they are using mind war to mentally condition people to becoming this future model citizen. And what typifies the
Yeah,
model citizen is they believe whatever's on the screen. It's like saying Bible believers, but instead of the state religion having a Bible, the state religion is media, and they're TV believers. And the TV believers
100%.
are a docile, conquered group of people.
Docile, sit there, just believe whatever they see.
Yep.
They, they'll see a certain person saying what they like. Oh, that's my hero. I don't know. I'm not gonna look into what they actually did or who they are, but that's who I like. Let me see some more suggestive videos. Then that's just what it's gonna go to. And it's like they already won. That's kind of how it is with. Like I grow up with these people. I'm 17 years old. That's how it is.
Interesting. Interesting. I was I remember specifically when I was about to be 18, I was like thinking about joining the army and stuff. But I remember at that point recognizing the difference between my line of thinking and the people who don't question. For me, it was mostly religion. I didn't even start questioning media till much later. But there's a lot of similarities, and it has to do with the authority and the individual becoming part of a collective of believers. So their individual doubts
Yeah.
no
So
longer matter.
like we were talking about in that comments, I went through all of those stages. So I started off as a kid, like I was growing up in churches and all this stuff. I started off by being an atheist. That was like my first stage of getting into the truth. So I was an atheist. I started questioning religion. So then growing up, I went into Trutherville, or whatever you like to call it. I was listening to Joe Rogan podcast and all these like shitty, fake scary stories, paranormal stories made by like, media propaganda people. So I was in that stage, and then eventually, I saw that video. That's honestly what started this whole thing. That pandemic video. So I saw that video like a month or two ago, and I looked into it, and I was like, oh, wow. And then I looked up, and then I looked into all the music, and it was talking about the deep state, and everything was connected. So I looked up the deep state, and then I ended up finding your channel somehow. Then I just started listening in, tuning in, and that's how, that's where I am right now. I've been looking to just digging. I've just been digging and digging. I found great documentaries connecting everything. Um, just videos from like years ago, like centuries ago, more than 10 years ago. Just reliable shit.
Right, right. Well, I definitely.
Also, I'm sorry for my language.
No, no, no. Actually, I appreciate your call. A lot of people here are really happy about this call. We always get these first-time callers, and it's interesting to hear people who are relatively new to this field of thought and inquiry. And to me, this is just where you go if you're really thinking deeply about things, and we share information. And it's not really about
Well, yeah,
agreeing.
that's
It's
it's kind of the crazy part. I didn't I'm not that I'm not that intelligent of a guy. I just saw I literally just saw this and it was just like, no, that's not a coincidence. And everyone in the comments is saying this guy's a time traveler. How about you just look into it? It isn't that hard. 10 minutes of your time. Oh, there you go.
I can
Okay.
see how it could happen. If you're an artist, you're a writer, and you're drawing your inspiration from the world around you, I can see how you might arrive at these things in advance. And we have a lot of musicians and artists associated with this channel who are, similarly uh, putting these ideas into their music. Because a lot of most music, I would say, reinforces the dominant paradigm in all of the daily news. It's like the news in audio format as music. It's all reinforcement. So it's interesting to hear true counterculture and figure out where they arrived at their conclusions. I'll check out this Dr. Creep.
I yeah. So yeah, the cool part is I think I have a pretty good idea from where it arrived at. It's a guy named his name is Gil something. He made a movement. The revolution will not be televised. That was his movement. It went on for more than 40 years. No one ever heard about it. And he also started. He basically was one of the main, big starters of hip hop, and that's where a lot of hip hop and rap music derives from today.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah, he played piano. He did jazz. He did other forms of jazz which turned into hip hop. But yeah, I can link that. I'll link the Doctor Creep video or whatever.
Yeah, by all means, you can post links here, or you can go into the Discord or the Gilded and post links there. That's all we do. We post links, we discuss, and we kind of it's not really an echo chamber. It's a platform for ideas that are outside of the mainstream echo chamber. But we always appreciate new people, new
Yeah,
perspectives, and everything you
yeah,
said here.
100%. How can I get into the Discord?
Just go to the main site, ips.monster, and there's a button right there.
Okay, that's cool. All right.
Well, hey, I appreciate you calling in. Appreciate your commentary and your insights and your perspective, and I'm glad that you have this ability to think for yourself and recognize that others
Yeah,
may not be on the same sheet, but it doesn't matter. I mean, it used to be
yeah. Well, I'm just
frustrating.
glad I could. I'm honestly, I'm just glad you made this platform for people like me, so we can. So we're not just crazy.
Yeah, it used to be frustrating for me because I didn't want to be the person at the party that was only interested in talking about the Skull and Bone Society and, taking the evening into a different area. But there has never been a platform that wasn't controlled and steering you back into mainstream politics and questionable news sources. So yes, this platform is the point of this whole think tank is this we're platforming these other perspectives that include fakery. We don't have to agree with a consensus, and I have no interest in gaining consensus agreement. Anyway, thank you very much for the call, and call back anytime.
Yeah, of course. You have a great night.
All right, everyone, that is Cole. You saw him in the chats there, Kole. I think there's a second name on there. Uh, First time caller. I think this is second time this week we've had in the last week that we've had first time callers. Some of them are lurkers, years and years. Cole Anchor, appreciate that. And then others are relatively new. Interesting too to hear that you're only a few months into this divergent thought and you're already finding value in this because a lot of people are turned off of what they call conspiracy theory or they're um, fitting in. And these ideas don't mean you have to not fit in. Like, I don't think you have to be alienated because you're a thinker. I just simply understand people's frames of reference. In fact, the liberals use this term now, positionality, where you have to consider where somebody's coming from when you analyze their information. And there is some truth to that because the MSM mind sees things a certain way. And you're not going to be able to communicate certain ideas because they won't be taken the same way. And when you understand where they're coming from, you can speak to that. And this is why I'm saying I'm ignoring Trutherville as far as its orthodoxies and its attachment to the mainstream. I'm only interested in certain people who've seen beyond it. I'm not interested in the normies, and I'm not trying to hold a sign on the same side of the road. The news is fake, wake up. To me, that is wasted. It makes you look crazy. And look, they look crazy. You're like, oh, they're crazy, apathetic, and brainwashed. Well, they look at you and they're like, this guy's crazy. He is brainwashed in his own way. So it's a mutual thing. Like the definition of a cult is the church down the street from yours. Isabel N says newer souls have less karma of the BS system. Well, here's something else too. The truth of the matter is very simple. The mass mediation gives you a worldview, and it doesn't match reality 100%. And those areas where it doesn't match, those augmentations, those hyperstitions, are things that you might want to analyze because maybe you've accepted some false premise here or there. Maybe it's darkened your worldview unnecessarily. But I'm not saying to be on our level, you have to know that 9/11 wasn't what they said, or you have to recognize that these things didn't happen. I don't think you need a list of things that you don't believe in to fit in with us. Rather, it's accepting the premise that we need to be skeptical today of all times because we are, of course, faced with a ubiquitous worldview shaping mechanism which has supplanted religion. And if you're not skeptical, you're going to go into their box. And I can't go back into the box because I'm not apathetic. I wasn't apathetic, so I went into Trutherville. And I was comfortable there. I thought, this is my people. But then eventually I realized this is not only entirely compromised, but it's being sucked into the GOP. It's just part of the Republican Party, more or less. And then, especially last year, I started really doing a deep dive into wokeism. Because nobody knew what woke meant. And they'd say woke. Oh, that's woke, cancel culture, and all this stuff. They're throwing these terms around, but what does woke really mean? And the more I analyzed woke, I realized wokeism is a mirror of trutherism. And both wokeism and trutherism are where you go if you don't fall for the mainstream news. The default position. You lean left, you go woke. You lean right, you go Trutherville. But there was never a position for people who don't go into the political horseshoe. All right, so we have been covering a lot of interesting ground here. And again, the Discord is available at ips.monster. Same thing with Gilded. And if you post links there, they will be analyzed, looked at. And if you comment on any of the platforms, I tend to notice and I copy and paste it into my minds.com. So if you follow me at minds.com/Infinite Plane Society, you can pretty much see everything that we're talking about, all of the links. I screen cap people's comments from Discord. I always try to attribute the comments to the commenters because we're building a network here. It's not about aggregating answers and monopolizing it, which a lot of big Twitter channels are just taking factoids out of context and sharing them without attributing it to the source. Well, I think we have to include every source. That's how you build a network. So if somebody has something to say, I it's about acknowledging where it came from. Not just to give them credit necessarily, but because someone else might want to continue that conversation with them. And a lot of us here know each other, maybe not directly, but you talk to people hours and hours and hours over several years, you get to know a lot of people. And our think tank is really unparalleled. I don't think there are other think tanks, there are other groups of people like this, few and far between, but ours is going to be the one, I think, to unify this parallel media infrastructure and to make this the basis for what I think a platform for skeptics, true media skeptics, but also just free thinkers in general. Baking Brad says, Tim, you heard of Walter Bosley? You discovered him on the Higher Side Chats. No, I'll check it out. I like Higher Side Chats. He does a lot of really great interviews. Walter Bosley. Again, post links if it's something you want me to consider. I'll check out Mr. Creep. Predictive programming is so fascinating to me, and artists sometimes get it right just because they're reading the zeitgeist. They're not all plugged into the metascript. They're not all part of it necessarily. The big ones obviously are. But the idea of reading the predictive programming to gauge what is coming is possible because predictive programming is how they repeat messaging before they introduce it in the fake news. Okay, we'll be live tomorrow, likely earlier, and I'll be more active in the Discord. So if you go into the Discord server, check the voice chat. I'm going to try to be there more often. We've been getting into some interesting conversations lately, and that was something of a hub before. And I'm going to try to recreate that because we get a lot of people who can't call in but who will join in these group chats. The title of today's live stream, The Bloodbath of Fake Bloodbaths, shows you again how this hyperstitional reality works. It's a closed system. The elite are on the outside, just like on Game of Thrones. They're looking at our model, and they throw stuff in there. And once they know that the idea is contained in enough minds, they projected it onto the collective psyche. Everybody is seeing this. Everybody's seeing mushroom clouds in recent years. Everybody's been inundated with these concepts. Then they throw it in to the news cycle, give you some false witnesses, some CGI, and it becomes real. And then we alter our lives accordingly. This is Chief Crow Auto Hoax, or GTFO. Thanks for joining. Thanks callers, and thanks chat. We'll see you all
Sitting
tomorrow,
in my
if
living
not this
room,
evening.
flipping through the channels, trying to find some peace. But I can't escape the sorrow that fills the room as I watch them actors cry on that big screen. They're just playing pretend, but it feels so real. The tears, they flow like rivers in the rain, but it cuts deep inside. It's a bittersweet pain, knowing their hurt ain't real, but mine ain't fake. They're just acting on that stage, trying to earn their fame. But here I am in my living room, feeling the pain. Tears on the big screen, they make me feel so alone. I guess I'll keep watching and crying, just like the actors on my TV's glow.
Alright, it is Infinite Plane Saturn Day, October the 21st, 2023. We survived all the ominous predictions about 1019, and the Seattle earthquake simulation didn't turn out any real casualties. They didn't psyop it, it was just a drill. But it's notable that they just faked a massive earthquake in Seattle. It's notable because the crisis actors are in place. They may already have filmed the special effects for some future calamity. That was Chief Crow and the Flat Earthworms. Where's the curve? A question that, as of yet, still remains unanswered. The curve is in your mind, if there is one, in which case you are a curvert. You are a curvert unless you have some kind of optical anomaly. Like, for example, Jimmy Kimmel claims he can see the curve of the earth from the beach. That's why we affectionately dubbed him Jimmy Curvert, because you know he's lying. Let's see what we have here. Rocco Calzone, Clockwork 113, Auto Hoaxer, P Trippa 103, Jesus Cow, P Trippa says, hope you're feeling better. Yeah, I had a strain in my back, and it's my fault. I deserved it. I mean, it won't happen again. I was exercising poor lifting technique, re-racking a barbell. It wasn't even that heavy, but I just should have dropped it down before I did the 180 to face the other direction. I didn't even feel it for 24 hours, but it ended up feeling like a knife in my back, and I couldn't really do anything except for write and read, which is fine. And while I was doing that, I was watching movies and I saw that World War Z was showing downtown, so I went to go see it. And I was kind of surprised, I guess I shouldn't be surprised at this point, that World War Z, even though it came out years ago and has plenty of predictive programming for the Convid thing, has relevance to right now, to today. I wrote a short blog piece on it, World War Z and Israel's 9/11, which we'll get into here in just a moment, because it's not just another mindless zombie movie blaming the fall of mankind on climate change. That's just part of it. It actually has some deeper connections to 2020 rabies infection in Taiwan, but ultimately it has some other subtext which I want to get into. But there's a scene in there where Brad Pitt survives a plane crash and a piece of jagged debris had actually gone through his back and he had to pull it out, and I was like, I knew exactly how he felt. Anyway, it only lasted about 24 hours and the pain went away. It was simply a strain, not a big deal. I got a lot of work done. Joined by Linda Curtis, who might be the original Wonder Woman if you believe Xmas Eve Evil and Dave J. That'd be Lydia Carter. Yeah, there's a rumor that I'm friends with Wonder Woman. Osher06. Maddie33 says, finally got to catch a live. Yeah, I'm going to try to maintain Infinite Plane Saturn Day. The next week and a half should be interesting. I'm starting the IPS Cyber Symposium series. This is when the think tank, which is certainly not street legal, but it's road worthy, it's when the IPS think tank hits the road. And you're going to see it's going to be a hybrid live in-person event. And it's not going to be preaching to the choir. It's not a conference where you hang out and drink and bowl and make friends. We have a purpose for every single one of these meetups. And it has to do with Autohoaxology 101 and solidifying this network of individuals who have overcome the mainstream media stranglehold over mass perception. And there's enough of us here. I'm not going to say it's going to change the status quo. I mean, not during an election year. There's no way people are going to tune out. And that's not even my intention. I just want to make this parallel media thing exist permanently as a fixture. Not this fake alt media, which is just a cesspool of recycled Q drops, old memes, out of context trutherisms that amount to nothing because they're put within the context of the fake news. It's all about perspective and frame of reference. And if you're still using Big Brother's viewfinder to frame your existence, yeah, you're still in the deception. Joined by Stranger Days. Northern Girl, P. Trippa says, earthquakes can be manufactured. It's common research in the fringe mud flood theory realm. Yeah, absolutely. And my eyes are still on Seattle. Ever since they cleared out 1,800 Amazon workers because of a, quote, crime wave, I was like, that's got to tie into this simulation for a 42-foot tidal wave that would hit Seattle were a 7.5 earthquake to hit the area. That 7.5 earthquake scenario with the 42-foot waves actually correlated with season 4, episode 2, we're talking about Stranger Things, where like the city actually cracked open with a 7.5 magnitude earthquake, spewing out hellfire and ashes looking like fallout. My point is, many of these movies have predictive programming for some kind of fallout nuke event, and Seattle seems to be in the crosshairs and has been for some time. And keep in mind, I'm not in the business of prophecy or making predictions, but if you look at any of these major transformative psychodrama psyops from 9/11 to COVID, they all happen after decades of predictive programming. They're inserting it into the culture in advance, and the media is fulfilling its own prophecies all the time. And to P. Trippa 103's point, earthquakes can be manufactured. Yeah, if you can make a movie about earthquakes, you can manufacture earthquakes. You just need a lot of crisis actors and special effects, and a total monopoly. And it may not look like there's a monopolistic hold over mass media, like, oh, this country has their own media, and the left hates the right, and there's independent media and alt media you can trust, like Stu Peters. No, it's monolithic. And what I mean by this is they all have the same frame of reference, and that is the monolith. That is the ubiquitous screen, the Bible of our era, the official version according to the World State Church. Yeah, mass media is the de facto world state religion. And I'm here saying that their God is a construct that you should reject. They don't have a word for what we are yet. You can't say atheists because it's outside of that realm. Auto hoaxer is the best they have. And that was just to imply that we were, in a knee jerk fashion, calling everything fake. And I'm like, even if that were true, even if that was true, and we had no discrimination, we would be right far more than all the people who automatically assume it to be real. And at no time has this been clearer than the present with what is going on in the Middle East, in Gaza, in Israel, and all that drama, which I think was predicted, programmed in advance. In advance. For example, the 40 headless baby scenario happening on the 33rd anniversary of the incubator baby massacre hoax. Not to mention the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur. These are all coordinated. I think it's called, no, Modern Warfare 3 came out on 10/6 on that actual anniversary date. So you had millions of people in this simulated modern warfare environment in a video game just before it breaks out on the news. It's all integrated. This mind control system is monolithic. Joined by maskless, faceless gardening gal says 2 weeks ago they ran a plane crash simulation at an airport in Seattle. Lots of crisis actors here. Thank you for the intel. Because what they're doing is they're finding out who's in the club. They're putting key personnel in place. Oh, like you're really good at this pretending to be a victim thing. You want to sign an NDA and take part in something. And I also think that when it comes to these drills, the reason why you don't have whistleblowers is they're paid well and they agree with the end goals. Imagine if you were a liberal gun grabber and someone said, hey, we can simulate a mass casualty event, put it on TV as real, and influence the public into giving up their guns and save the lives of kids. And you would say, wait a minute, you're saying we could lie and create fake dead kids and kill them and save real lives? I can do that. That's definitely acceptable. It's what you would call, I think you call these things the noble lie or something like that. There's various ways that people justify. The end justifies the means. Let's lie about some fake dead kids and save real lives. And they might actually believe this is just some sort of activism they're engaging in, propaganda. Eddie F says the new Leonardo DiCaprio movie has some truth in it. Freemasonry was on the movie. I'm going to watch it. You're talking about the one about I know which one. I just saw the trailer. They said it's his best work. And Leonardo DiCaprio is a very interesting character. I often point out how these actors have certain archetypes or they have certain symbols attached to them that they carry movie to movie. And so you have to look at them as a contiguous whole. The same character that you saw in the Titanic, you could consider that to be the same person in Don't Look Up. And when you look at it from this perspective, you can see, okay, they carry a deeper message. For example, the Titanic movie, it's about a boat sinking, and Leonardo is the face of that movie. Well, Don't Look Up, is about the Earth as Titanic about to sink because of a space iceberg, a comet. And the only person who has any sense who's warning anybody is Leonardo DiCaprio. It's part of creating these parallels. He was also in Django Unchained, which has a lot of interesting subtext related to BLM and the, I guess you would call it the CRT, Critique of America. And then, of course, he's a major greenie. Isn't he friends with Greta? He has a massive carbon footprint, but he has miniature actual footprints. Have you seen his feet? Not that I look at that kind of stuff, but he was on his mega yacht, and there's a photo of him on his mega yacht, and I was like, wait a minute, that's strange. Because his feet are basically in front, and they just seemed extremely small relative to the rest of them. But anyway, yeah, he gets on a mega yacht. He's got a massive carbon footprint, and yeah, he will never make up for it, no matter how small his actual feet. Joined by HLG ears up. Salty Siren says, Happy Saturn Day. I'm all shook up Elvis. Yeah, Elvis is a big part of the predictive programming for the coming 9/11ing of Seattle. And I guess we can just use that term 9/11ing. I think in Israel they said they had 15 9/11s that day. Your 10/7 was 15 9/11s? What is that up to? Yep, 10/7 was 15 9/11s. And it was an inside job. They're just recycling the post 9/11 guardrail alternative narratives for people to get mad about. Joined by X322, Citizen Z, Symbia, awesome. Mom with Sons, yay, Saturn Day. Portal Complex, Napoleon Wilson, Reverse History, thank you for joining. Cope says Leonardo DiCaprio. Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'm only interested in watching that movie because when you have individuals that are used to carry such momentous propaganda messages, they're not going to have a movie where it's meaningless. Every single thing they do, every appearance for that matter, it needs to be looked at in this context. Like Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Terminator, part of World War Zero, cutting mankind's carbon footprint in half when the Terminator movie was about killing man because he's killing Gaia. These aren't coincidences. Or the fact that he's, Schwarzenegger that is, he's the paragon of toxic masculinity with his big gun and his big muscles and all this stuff. Meanwhile, James Cameron, the director of the movie, says that, I guess, he actually said that masculinity itself is a toxin, that testosterone is a toxin. So T2, Terminator, too much testosterone. Baja Pickleball says, best show alive, Fepanotti. Yep, and this is just beginning. You know, we're in the early stages. We had to, assemble the rafts, which we've done. We've established the parallel media as a thing, and it does exist, and it is self-aware. But the next stage is for it to amass all of its numbers and become self-aware as a unified entity. That's why you've been using the Kraken imagery. That's the key here. Because the red pill thing was co-opted by alt media, and you get these characters like Tucker Carlson, who's like, wow, the George Floyd story was a lie? He died from fentanyl? That's like a recycled side story, a recycled alternative narrative 3 years old that in no way challenges the essential fakery of the thing. But he's like, look at me, I'm blowing a whistle on Twitter. I'm like, who falls for this stuff? But that's where red pill, that's where conspiracy is. And they see someone like Tucker, who's a fake populist, as their way to reach mass media because they're under this delusion, and this is truthers in general. They're under this delusion that if they can just get their truth out, people will, quote, wake up. And it's like, so you guys aren't awake. It's the false awakening. You went from the blue pill dream world where you were comfy into the red pill nightmare, which is just as fake but deeper in the deception, deeper in the weeds. Okay, I was told by Eddie F. that it's a great movie, this one with DiCaprio. I'll take a look. He's actually a good actor. I think he got called DiCaprio by Michael Savage originally, and it's probably over his green stuff. And that's one of the things here, is that they do take the best actors, the best artists, the best musicians, the best writers, and they turn them into mouthpieces for their bigger agenda. So yeah, he's a climate shill. And he's a hypocrite. I wouldn't even rip on him if he gave his wealth, if he burned it, because we don't need that. It's bad for the environment. If he had just destroyed his wealth somehow, and if he just walked around in Birkenstocks and lived green, meditated a lot, whatever, ascetic lifestyles. Like I heard Greta got arrested recently, and I'm like, good. Arrest the greenies. They're the ones who want to put you in jail. They want to jail your families. They want you to be part of this ubiquitous lockdown society to save Gaia. It's like, well, you first. If you're an environmentalist, if you believe in global warming and you drive a car, you're a sick hypocrite. You really are. And if we do get flooded, you deserve it. Spirit Jordak says there was an asteroid in DiCaprio's movie Revenant without anything to do with the plot. Interesting. Because in the movie Don't Look Up, it was a comet to hit the Earth in 6 months, 14 days. 614 is Trump's birthday, which had some interesting connections there. And I was the one, I think, the first one to point out that when they made him the face of Don't Look Up, it was really about two things. Well, three things. One, he's this new Noah warning us of this coming flood. And I often talk about the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, how that's the new Noah. They appropriated the symbol of the dove and everything else. But he was also agoraphobic. He had to keep taking pills because of his anxiety. He was scared of going outside because he knew the comet was coming, the meteor was coming. He was agoraphobic, like you're supposed to be. You're supposed to be afraid of open spaces. I'm algoraphobic. I totally reject that notion that we need to lock down to save the earth. So he's this Noah character. He's aware of how perilous our situation is, and he's unable to do anything because of the greedy corporate, these tech kind of like corporate overlords are like, no, we're going to mine the asteroid. We're not going to deflect it. So they reintroduced Noah, and he's warning us, and everyone's laughing at him. And I think that's even part of Revelation. It's like when the ark doors slam shut, it was a little too late. I think it's that Genesis 6:6 or something. The idea being, of course, they didn't listen to Noah. But then another part of it is don't look up. Well, don't look up is also a reference to don't look up information, because one of the things about the movie was that the misinformation, the questioning of the scientists, don't look up, don't use the question mark, that is what brought about our demise. So we shouldn't even be looking up and questioning the priesthood. Yeah, there it is. Go to the ark and your whole family, because I have found you're righteous in this generation. Great story, although it's a little backward to me. If I wrote the Bible, I would make it so that Satan is the one that floods everybody, and God is the one that saves them with the ark. I don't know why they got that backward. They're like, wait, who's the good guy here? Not quite understanding this. Okay, another aspect to it, of course, this Don't Look Up movie was the whole Titanic thing. The Titanic as a metaphor for the West, which they've already attached to 9/11 and the towers sinking. The Titanic sinking. Now it's the West as the Titanic as the Earth about to sink. And at this time, you had DiCaprio with his ridiculous mega yacht. Bezos was out there flexing on his mega yacht. Salty Siren says Trump's birthday is allegedly a new Mandela effect. Yeah, the Mandela affected, the reality fluid are not reliable sources of anything at this point. Unbelievable. It's still around. Let me read this, because I went to go see World War Z and Israel's 9/11. I checked out this theater where I plan to stream or air, or play, South Pole. We've been working on South Pole behind the scenes here, and I think if we can get the production value where it needs to be, standardize the lengths, as we've been discussing, utilizing all the tools we have, including ChatGPT, I would like to produce something that we could maybe even play before a general audience, just for reactions. And this latest South Pole episode has a scene I'm working on now, which has, just say, Ben Shapiro and baby heads as part of it. Linda Curtis says the Noah story is a Titanic story. Yeah, pretty much. The whole environmentalist movement is based on a reiteration of Noah's flood, which is stolen from what? The Epic of Gilgamesh? It's all recycled. And in fact, they have replaced with their iconography, this is all syncretism, religious syncretism with their symbolism. They have actually turned the god of death and rebirth into the god of recycling, the green god. The original vegetation god Osiris, the god of the earth, is green, and the recycling movement is all about this. I have some water bottles here, and the company is called Reborn or something, and it says, recycle these so they can be reborn as a pair of denim jeans. I'm like, what? And I look at it, and it's like, if you look closely, the three nails in the recycling bin, the cube thing, is, and the cube is basically the same symbol as the cross. It's the folded up cross, and the cube represents this material realm, the earth, and the earth god, of course. When you're recycling, what are you recycling for? You're trying to please the earth god. You're letting him know you're sorry for being a consumer, and you're trying to expiate some of that guilt because of your excessive carbon footprint so that he doesn't flood you. You're trying to show him that you're sorry for your wickedness. I mean, it's really sickening. It's genuflecting. When you're in front of that recycling dumpster, you are kneeling before the altar of Baal. And if you look at the three arrows, it actually does create a triangle up, and then in between the arrows, a triangle down. It's a six-pointed star. It's the symbol of the earth god, another version of it. And you could look at the three nails also symbolically here as tying into the idea, this general motif of the dying, recycled sun god, etc. Yes, Salty Siren says, sorry for existing. Exactly. The original sin in this new modern context is your carbon footprint. It's not Adam and Eve, it's your carbon footprint. Every breath you breathe, every breath you take is basically, it's a zero-sum game, is what I mean. Like, I often talk about how this is a closed system. Mentally, they've created a closed system for us so they can control access, monopolize, scarcity. And by zero-sum game, it's built to inculcate envy, where if someone does good, oh, it's because a lot of people did bad. It's not reality, but that's the kind of class envy construct they put into everything. And it's also tied into environmentalism. Like, we're meant to look at someone like Leonardo DiCaprio and think that he's condemning us all. Meanwhile, he's going to survive on his yacht. We get flooded. Do you think it's going to bother the Bezoses or the DiCaprios? Not at all. They will rise above. And speaking of which, I've often spoken about how Jeff Bezos is the world stage counterpart to Nimrod, the builder of the Tower of Babel. Without getting into the details there, it's notable that post-flood, Nimrod was the builder of the first civilization. So it's kind of interesting because he's kind of poised to do just that. Okay, continuing. Off the Wall 74 says, I think we're all missing the big picture. Daytime soap operas are real. Yeah. We live on a movie set, and we are extras in a reality TV show that has been written by the power elite and will go down in history as how things actually happened. It's an entirely scripted reality, and they don't appreciate your input. They don't ask for it. They don't want it. They will eliminate it or exclude it if it doesn't echo them. We're meant to live in this echo chamber. Interestingly, Echo is from mythology, was a suitor of Narcissus, and she was cursed to only be able to repeat whatever somebody else just said. And so there she is in love with a narcissist, just repeating him. And I'm like, that's pretty much every person's relationship with the mass media. It doesn't care about you. It's cultivating and maintaining its own image at your expense. And you're not welcome unless you echo. Okay, this is from a couple days ago. World War Z and Israel's 9/11, predictive and concurrent programming. Again, I thought it was going to be a mindless zombie movie blaming the fall of man on climate change. And they mentioned it at the very beginning. And I think they do this in all movies now. Like, every single science fiction movie out there starts off with, after climate change destroyed the world because of capitalism, this happens. It's cliche at this point. It's actually a thing. It's called cli-fi, climate fiction, where they got rid of the guys with the knives chasing through the woods and they've replaced it with Gaia's retribution. That's really the enemy in every single major movie now. It's Mother Nature getting back. So man's the enemy. Man's the enemy of man because man's the enemy of Gaia, and Gaia's getting back at man, and the rest of us are just innocent, caught up in the retribution that's being meted against those who are, you know, mostly able to rise above it. Like the rich people who are destroying the world are the most insulated from the effects of climate change. That's the general story they tell. They say it disproportionately affects the poor. I really picked up on this a couple years ago when you had that 19-story building in the Bronx burn at the Twin Parks apartments. And the whole story was about how space heaters caused the building to burn. And they said, well, it wasn't space heaters. It was actually the rich people because they caused climate change, and the poor couldn't afford to heat their places, so they bought these cheap space heaters. So space heaters became a symbol of inequity. All right, let's see here. Continuing on this thing, this movie, again, zombie movie, climate change was mentioned, but the real cause was rabies in Taiwan. They didn't mention a bat, but it was pretty much the same story. Kind of shady about the origins. It was replete with predictive programming for 2020, masks, etc., and the instant, chorus of, we need to get the vaccine. Now, the zombie movies, in my view, have always been predictive programming for future lockdowns, traumatizing people about the unvaccinated so they don't resist quarantine. It was a pre-sales pitch for the vaccine, which would be, the fake solution to the fake problem. And not only that, but it's a sales pitch for this new world order, where now we have to give the government these controls to regulate things in this way because of this new threat. Another thing that I don't often hear people talking about, but I think was a huge part of 2020, 2021, is the further erosion of privacy. Like we already have been trained to commodify our inner thoughts and get rid of privacy and make the private public through social media. But now your private medical status is up for discussion. Anybody at that point where they were like signaling about it, vaccine, selfies, vaxies, it's like there's no privacy anymore. You got to tell everybody what's beneath your skin, what's in your blood. Are you a goo blood or a pure blood? It's like, what if it's nobody's business? No such thing. And after 9/11, they got beneath your skin with the naked body scanners. Do you remember the original controversy about how now the TSA gets to grope you? They get to palpate your body and look at you with an x-ray scanner that lets them see through your clothes. Like, okay, so now the privacy invasion just got one stage deeper. 9/11, 19 years later, COVID. Now they get to know what's in your blood. Next is, and they're not done yet, the next part is what's in your mind, what's in your browser history. I'm starting to wonder if I got blacklisted. I'm still awaiting results on my background check. I'm wondering if maybe it's something I tweeted. Maybe I need to create a new persona to engage the real world that in no way connects to my online opinions, because these may be liabilities in the future. Okay, now the climatic scene. This is the big part. There was a scene in World War Z where there's a tower of zombies climbing into Israel over a newly built wall. Now, this contained a couple tie-ins to our recent situation. So in World War Z, they're climbing over the wall, just like Hamas paraglided over the wall. Second, in the movie, there's an inference that Mossad had advanced knowledge about the coming pandemic, and Israel built up their walls in preparation for the zombie attack. So here's a narrative of, oh, they knew. And even now you hear it, Netanyahu knew. And repeating this stuff like, oh, Bush knew, so we can get into war. They're recycling a lot of 9/11 claptrap, so get ready for that. And third, the Palestinians were allowed in. They opened the gates and they let the Palestinians in. And they said, every person we save is one less zombie we have to fight. So now you have peace. World peace because of what? An alien threat. And this is another kind of subtext here. How many times have we seen movies where, or scenarios where it's like, we would all be one if we just had an outside threat? I even hear some conservative types talking about missing the days after 9/11 when we were all unified. Like, what do you mean we were all unified? Unified in what? In shock, in terror? You want to go back to that? You want to go back to that? Have another trauma bond? Insane. My point being, this movie had a lot of connections to right now with the over the wall, the infiltration, seeing IDF soldiers dying. So you have this merging of Palestine and Israel, but their noisy celebrations draw in the zombies and they all die. So what does that say? If you let them in, you're all going to die. In the movie, they mention the 1973 Arab-Israeli War, and this is a tie-in to the 50th anniversary attack, which we just saw a couple of weeks ago. The fact this movie is being promoted right now on Amazon pretty extensively, an extended version, but moreover, it's being played here downtown. And I'm like, why is it showing at this theater? It's just some innocent zombie movie getting close to Halloween, sure. But now that I looked at it, from a more metascript perspective, the imagery of Israel under attack by zombies, IDF soldiers dying, 9/11 imagery, plus it's, in a post-COVID world, it actually seems to be too much to be coincidence. It's an older movie. I had never watched it. I was actually kind of impressed by it. I didn't think it was as bad as I had heard from some of the. See, George Romero, who did the Night of the Living Dead and kind of created this genre in film, said the movie was too high budget and basically destroyed zombie movies. I think it was like 400 million bucks, but I don't really think so. It's a mostly generic thing. Okay, let me open up phones here. It's Infinite Plane Saturn Day. Hey, what's up, caller? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I didn't expect to get through. Is there much background noise?
Not on my end. Just
Okay.
a lot of general. Actually, on my end, I got like a fan in the background. If that doesn't bother you, can you hear me okay?
I think I might have a hum on my line, but you sound good to me. I think this old landline I'm on probably has issues, but when we start delving down that, the breakdown of infrastructure and everything.
Right, right.
Yeah,
Well,
it's fortunate for I don't get in that easily. Am I interrupting a particular thread, a
no,
particular
I mean,
discussion thread?
today's just Infinite Plane Saturn Day, which I leave it open to whatever we talked about in the past week. And we were just talking about World War Z, a Brad Pitt movie I saw the other night that just happens to have this climactic scene where the zombies go over the wall into Israel. And I'm like, this is predictive. Well, it was predictive programming, but they're replaying it downtown, and now it's like this just reinforces what I saw in the news. And I'm just commenting on how you can't escape the MSM echo chamber.
Yeah, I read your piece on World War Z, and I have to tell you that from the very beginning, as soon as I saw those ridiculous paragliders, I'm thinking to myself, "Hey, Granny, break down the shotgun from the shelf." Like I'm Jed Clampett. You could shoot those things down with a shotgun, right? I mean, come on. Then I'm turning around and I'm seeing an interview with a former IDF intelligence officer who says even back in the old days, there's no way that even a stray cat could cross that. They had motion sensors and everything else. She says this is ridiculous. She says there's no way in hell that attack, quote unquote, was a surprise. And she stared right in the camera and said that. It's out there. The
Well, I
video's
mean, look,
out there.
do you agree with me that this is just a recycled template narrative from post 9/11?
Well, the first thing, it's so weird. As soon as I heard the 40 dead beheaded babies, 40 seems to have. You're the numerologist here. I'll get into biblical gematria if you want. The 40 years and all that. But as soon as I said the first thing I thought was what you do, Nayara and her testimony before that committee there. They basically robbed. Oh, they dumped the babies. So out of the incubator. That's the first thing I ask. If I see anybody bring, well, no one wants to talk about it now because it's debunked, right? Or is it?
It's
Has
debunked, yeah.
Snopes
They said,
debunked it?
yeah, the Kuwaiti baby thing was fake. They admit that was fake. It's on the
Well,
33rd anniversary.
but right. What about this 40 dead babies right here, though. That's turning out to have originated with a what do you call it? A hearsay from a reporter who allegedly heard it from an Israeli soldier. It's a third part. Blah blah blah.
But again,
My uncle.
the Nyara thing was on 10/10/1990. The 40 baby heads 10/10/2023, literally 33 to the days to the day, years to the day.
Oh,
They
you're
did
thinking.
a psyop. It's too
They've
much.
probably got a whole file cabinet full of psyops for that day. There's only 365 days in a year, and there's only, you know what I'm saying? Like they don't index every script. That's a Hill and Knowlton were the ones who coached Nayara, who was she was the daughter or the niece of the Kuwaiti ambassador in residence. Is that right?
Yeah,
And
yeah, well connected.
when you, yeah, but Hill and Knowlton were the ones who not only wrote the script, but they coached her in that. They're the ones that really should have been held accountable, and I think they just got bigger contracts from it. But it was so the way they drove people. So the first thing I thought when I heard this, oh, Hamas has beheaded 40 babies. I thought, give me a break. I said, did they dump them out of the incubators first? That's what I want to know.
Funny. So
I'm posting that all over the place
you
on
made that
Republican
connection.
sites.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going over to Todd Starnes and Dan Bongino and all the Republican sites around on Facebook, and I'm saying, hey, did they dump those babies out of the incubators first? I hope they sure dumped them out of the incubators onto the cold hospital floor. But here's the thing: there's a couple generations that are too young to even remember that.
Okay, that's the key word,
You,
generation. Okay, you mentioned the 40. I think the 40 may be a reference to the generation, and it may reference, I don't know, it just seems like everything that's happening now is recycled to impact the present generation. Like, let's give them their 9/11. Let's give them their baby atrocity with the
but
terrorists.
you're telling me that young people won't do enough homework this is Nick Bostrom's simulation argument. We can get into that. That's exactly what this is. You're telling me that young people out there, Gen Zers and Gen Next, I mean, really young people are not going to be hip enough that they're going to go plowing through libraries of this stuff and say, what are they doing? They're using the same old stupid scripts. And you're telling me that because they're video game. These kids are into video game. You're telling me they're not going to go back and say, look at this. This is the same
No,
stupid script. All they've done is change some of the
they will
details.
be gaslit if they question, but for the most part, I think what will happen is they will see the discrepancies and they'll say, wait a minute, this can't be real. Therefore, I'm going to follow this alternative media outlet that agrees with me. They'll get caught up in the political horseshoe, and the fakery becomes just an excuse, I think, to question the narrative, but then they go to the counter narrative. Like, they won't wake up. They will be caught up in the political horseshoe. This doesn't wake people up. It never does. It's just, if anything, it activates them. It wakes them from their dream and puts them in their nightmare state, but they don't break free of the news media's ability to fake reality to them. Like, they can't fake me out. There's nothing the news can do to make me think that, a nuke's going to go off in Seattle and it's real when I see it on TV. I've already kind of disabused myself of the notion they have that power. And I don't think that any amount of exposure to the lies we see now, the mendacity, will cause people to break that spell. They still kind of accept everything. It's just this one event seems, you know, politicized. A little fog of war, fog of info war.
But it's an emotional need that they're satisfying. It's for affiliation. It has nothing to do with any pursuit of objective truth. It's a deep need for affiliation. Because of an environment of what Matthias Desmet called free floating anxiety. I don't know, that might be mystifying it a little or psychoanalyzing it a bit, but maybe free floating anxiety, he says. Because of all the alienation and how fucked up society is. And so people are looking for something to it. First of all, they're looking for somebody to blame for their alienated state, and they're looking for something a narrative to explain it coherently, and for something to affiliate with. So if the pandemic narrative accords with it, or the climate change narrative accords with it, you affiliate with that. You find a social grouping. It is really about. It has nothing to do with any objective search for truth on the part of the individual. It's about finding a social identity to affiliate with. And that might be
Mm.
ethnic or ideological. So by the way, our friend General Flynn, I knew you'd be interested in this, so I posted some links over at the Tim Osmond Facebook page, which they're probably shadow banning me against you or something. I don't know, but um, General Flynn is out off the reservation. Apparently, he's calling Q out now as a military psyop, and this was a guy who built up Q in the beginning.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
most certainly did
I've
build it up. Yeah.
seen some evidences of his meltdown. I'm looking forward to it. And oh, really quick.
He was on this X22, this grifter X22. There's a whole clique. I don't want to say cadre of grifters out there. They're mostly in it for the money. Like a lot of these people clustered around. You remember Jerome Corsi?
Oh yes.
He sort of was in on the ground floor of this. But another one is Ann Vandersteel. And then there was a character who had the online identity on YouTube of Praying Medic. But there were a host of these people that they they were plugged into the Q grift machine because there's a lot of money being made off the coffee mugs, the T-shirts.
Look, for people who don't know,
Uh,
yeah,
you
Q
know,
was a huge grift machine. It really was. Just as a joke once, I put
from the
all,
beginning,
I put Q drops
from the
in a
beginning.
PDF and I sold them on Teespring for $5, and I made more than $200 in
You
revenue.
devil, you.
And I
You devil.
was
You
just
profited off of the psyop. Now look at you. That puts you in a class with DeFango because he was selling. It was so ridiculous.
no, it doesn't.
People were, yeah, he was
'Cause
selling Q coffee mugs, and it's pretty funny.
but I'm taking
Well, that
money.
was the link.
I'm taking money from the brainwashed Q extremists and I'm putting it into our hands. So you could argue that it's right for me to do that, but they cut it off on Teespring after I sold so many. But I'm just pointing out that's how much money was flying around. If you had a Q flag, somebody's ready to buy
Oh,
it.
oh yeah. For a while there, it was a gold mine. Now you gotta. It's like you're plumbing the depths here of the MAGA constituency, which is to say, there's got to be an audience out there. I don't know, Q moms maybe, Q soccer moms, or there's got to be an audience out there that's got the money to pony up for this. It's kind of like some of the mostly middle-aged women I would see at these exo politics conferences with Jordan Sather. Talk about a grifter, this character. Now we're getting off into the field of ufology. That is to say, if you've seen Mirage Men and you know the kind of psyops that the Air Force and the Pentagon were running to cultivate this whole ufology zoo from I don't even want to. The one who I think about the most is Alfred Weber, but that's exopolitics. Yeah, where there was a galaxy, an ambassador to the galaxy, and blah blah blah.
Yeah, they brought
Crazy
that in.
shit.
They brought
Michael Salla.
they brought that into Q. They brought in this fringe of Q where eventually it's going to bring in the
Yeah,
UFOs.
they
And
sent right over.
you
Jordan
notice
Sather was one.
you said
Another one was Wilcock. Is his
hmm
name David Wilcock. David Wilcock. Another one was Benjamin Fulford. Oh, he's been around on this stuff since all the way back to Obama days. In fact, what they did was they took out the same exact websites. I couldn't believe it. When Obama was running, they said Obama was going to arrest all the war criminals and all the gangsters, and he was going to set things right.
really they
And
did
there
that
was
with
going to be
Obama
these.
too.
Yeah, they did, and all they did, Benjamin Fulford websites did, was change Obama to Trump. That was the craziest thing. They didn't
Oh
change
my
any
goodness.
other wording, and they put those same websites out there, and I'll bet they're still making money
So it's all just
because people
recycled.
want to believe in this. I'm telling you, people want to be in that cast of thousands. Have you ever looked at the making of a major Hollywood film spectacle in a small dirt poor town in Texas in the 1950s or 60s, even right on into the 70s? One I'm thinking of the most is probably a little dated for your younger audience was James Dean, Elizabeth Taylor, and Rock Hudson in Giant, based on a novel by Edna Ferber, I believe, but
Yeah, I think
one
it's
of these.
been established here that you can definitely fake events that involve lots of people. It's just a matter of compartmentalization. And the UFO thing, though, I want to point this out really quick because it's still huge for some reason. UFO believers have a substandard way of assessing evidence. For them, it's just like it's their hope. So it's not even scientific. It's not even honest. It's actually very dishonest with themselves.
Wait a minute now, don't belittle faith. That is religious faith. It's true. It has nothing to do with science or empiricism. It is a kind of an affirmation of faith. They want to believe in this. Look at Carl Gustav Jung wrote about this. I think as early as the 1950s, when the whole shortly after Roswell, saying that what he thought was he didn't know whether the phenomenon themselves were really happening, the observations were really occurring, or whether the interpretation of these anomalies didn't reflect more a crisis of modern civilization, modern culture, in the aftermath of this horrible world war, and the specter of nuclear holocaust facing humanity and all the issues that were confronting humanity. Bear in mind, this is Carl Gustav Jung now, the guy that broke with Sigmund Freud, and I think was a lot smarter.
Yeah, I remember in Man
And
and His
he's
Symbols,
saying,
he said that the
right,
UFOs were
right, and
projections of this need for psychic wholeness, and that this circle.
right,
Hmm.
right. And you know who else? Joseph Campbell gets into that in a big way when in the Masks of God, which is just like I guess this 4 volume series on religion, um, Eastern religion, Western religion, modern religion, something he calls creative religion. And at the end, I couldn't believe I was reading this in the 1970s, but he characterized the Star Wars movie cult as a whole, as the foundation of a whole new religion that he thought might supersede in numbers many of the old, traditional religious denominations in America and around the world. That the influence of the movie series was going to create a whole new sort of global cultural, well, cult, basically.
Fascinating. Now, is it far-fetched that a science fiction paradigm could become a dominant religion? I look at science.
Equivalent to Greek mythology, equivalent to the gods of Greek mythology or Norse mythology that we used to study in school. I don't know. Do students in school study Greek mythology or Norse mythology at all these days?
I'm not quite sure. I did independently. I found it to be interesting, but to the point on Star Wars, they clearly designed Luke and Darth to be based off of night and day, sun and Saturn, Lord of Darkness.
Right.
So they have these same archetypes that they're constantly using. And I mentioned this to people. It's like you're watching these outer space dramas, but they're putting you into a more archaic frame of reference. And that's why I've been saying for some time that space is a repackaging of the old concepts of heaven. It's all repackaging. We live in a science fiction version of an older worldview, in my opinion.
Right. And the polycentric illusion of competing superpowers or nation states would have us believe that Russia and China, that the superpowers, that is to say, the ones that are in the club, as you say. Now, India supposedly is now in the club because they landed something on the dark side of the moon. The ones who are in the club, they have arrived, truly arrived at legitimate superpower status because they're in that lunar fantasy club. They're part of that that new religion. By the way, since we're mentioning General Flynn, they got another general that they're cultivating out there. He may be more important than General Flynn. His name is McInerney. McInerney. McIerney. McInerney, I think is how it's pronounced. He's a general too. I don't know if he's the same as like Flynn. Of course, they're both 9/11 cowards, 9/11 liars, 9/11 traitors, historically speaking. But that's a separate matter. But anyway, General McInerney is predicting that MAGA supporters are going to be tagged as terrorists by the FBI and many of them arrested. He's predicting that right now.
Well, they have already branded MAGA terrorists as such. And I've been pointing out for some time that I believe the QAnon movement was created by General Flynn and others to create the American domestic equivalent of the Taliban with the MAGA ban. That QAnon is Quran, Quran radicals, QAnon radicals. It's a one-for-one template, and that they just manufacture the threat here so they can carry out their psyops, and people will believe it. And when you look at it, who's the enemy of QAnon? Who's the enemy of the Islamists? The deep state, the great Satan, Israel, little Satan. It's the same thing. If you really get down to it, I'm thinking it's a setup for sure. And the fact that they're now going to say that MAGA terrorists are going to wreak havoc, well, the public's ready to accept it. They've been primed. They will believe it when it's faked.
It does tend to resemble the Operation Trust, or a Union of Russian Monarchists operation run by Felix Dzerzhinsky and the Bolsheviks shortly after the Bolshevik seizure of power, and into the 1920s, where they sponsored a classic controlled opposition called the Trust, that propagated the notion that, well, the Bolsheviks were only pretending to believe in what they were in their announced intentions, and really behind the scene there was a patriotic core of former czarist officers and generals that were, ready to set things right, and nurtured all kinds of false hopes. But the target there was the emigre population in the capitals of Europe: Paris, Berlin, London, Amsterdam. Russian czarist and members of the nobility who were emigres, and initially it was thought, well, they could be, if you set up these dummy organizations, somehow or other you could keep track of them, you could surveil them and watch them. But what happened was it became an opportunity for the new Soviet, Cheka, to infiltrate Western intelligence agencies, especially the British, because the British got involved in financing a lot of these anti-Bolshevik operations. So, it's a game that they play. But you're right, when you look at the QAnon, but the idea behind Operation Trust was, you might as well call it Operation False Hope, because that's all it's really. But it's you're psychoanalyzing the target population, and then you're just crafting this narrative that
Yes.
will, I guess, seduce them emotionally.
Exactly. They basically, what they did is they pandered to the conspiracy theorists and turned them into a voting bloc for the right, and they target marketed in a very sophisticated way. You mentioned middle-aged women was a term you used. I don't think it's a coincidence that JFK Jr. became something of a rock star and a god to the Q movement, because I think a lot of the people who know who he is, I never knew who he was, are pretty much about his age, and they think he's alive, and they might be able to go make out with him if they go to Dallas on 11/22. Like, they basically sold people a bill of goods. They brought out the QAnon shaman to get the more new agey types, and they got the 4chaners. So they built a voting block out of conspiracy theorists on the fringe.
Yeah, I kind of see it as a 3-point, sort of like 3 legs of the stool. One is the kayfabe, which is to say the performances. Kayfabe, as in World Wrestling Entertainment. The performances and drills and the actions, the kinetic aspect of it. Next is cosplay, which is to say you've got all of these activists like, Republicans, Democrats, woke people, some of the people that were running up and down in the streets during the George Floyd business, right? That's the cosplay. You get up in your costume and you pretend to be a commie revolutionary or a conservative patriot flag waver. You get to be that, or one of Donald Trump's minions. That's the cosplay aspect of it. Yeah, and then the economics of it are the crisis actors, because somebody's got to make a living. Everybody's got to make a living off this stuff. So
Now,
that's where
cost
the
is just
economy
costume, right? Like, astronauts are just doing cosplay, would you say?
Oh my, I never realized how big cosplay was. I didn't, especially in the Asian world, but in America too. In America, it's huge. And then if you think about the Republican Party and the Democrats too, but especially these Christian patriot, Christian evangelical Republicans who, now think about this for a second. Hold these thoughts in your head at the same time. Here's Donald Trump. This guy, he's on his 3rd wife. He's probably got a busload of strippers in there somewhere. And behind that, maybe another carload of hookers who he's been involved with at one time or another. But the so-called Christian right, who are the guardians of morality and righteousness on the American political scene, the right to lifers, they're going to all pile into the wagon behind this Donald Trump, who they know has been basically sort of a mobbed up playboy, partying at Steve Rubell's Studio 54 every weekend with a supermodel on two of them, one on each arm. you know, the made man. If he were Italian, he'd be a made man. But he married. We
Wait,
know what the
you're
story is
you're
with
talking
Trump.
about the same Donald Trump who just posted an image of himself in a courtroom illustration seated next to Jesus Christ. That Donald Trump?
Yeah, exactly. You got it. You pinned it. You pinned the tail on the donkey. That is it. And when you see, well, first he was Moses. Who called him Moses? Actually, I think it was Marjorie Taylor Greene who started this crucifixion of Trump, our Jesus Trump, when he was indicted in New York. Is that what she was the one who
Yes,
started with that?
he was
But that was
Christified.
around Easter.
Uh-huh,
I
Holy
think
Week.
it yeah, it was around Holy. The timing of it was perfect, really, because then we all started looking around. Well, who would be his disciples? Who would be the ones who would be the Judas who betrayed him, and who would be the doubting would DeSantis be the doubting Thomas, and we all started playing games with that. But yeah, it's crazy. And the thing is, Tim, I don't know what to say because I run into this. In social media. You got these religious people, Muslims, Christians, Jews, and they're so hard-headed about this stuff. It's like they are willing to sacrifice a painful truth. They don't want to face a certain painful truth because it just might not cohere with, I don't know, their particular theological interpretation of who knows, God and the nature of redemption and the soul, and they
The
just have a certain,
endless equivocation and
well, the
self
Bible, like
gaslighting.
the
They'll say
yeah,
things like, like God's using him because he's a fallen man, or
right, excuses,
Jesus
right? They're living,
associated with prostitutes, and Jesus
right,
associated with
yeah, right.
the lower of the gutters.
They have endless excuses for every sellout and betrayal that this clown Trump guy comes up with. But, he's a show for Pfizer now. Give me a break. I could go on for hours about this. But yeah, that picture where you see Trump laughing with Obama and laughing, and they're both laughing at each other, and the caption says, "Guess what I'm going to do next? I'm going to convince these people that I'm a Christian." And Obama comes back with, "Oh yeah, that'll work good. It worked for me." It's like these people. Surely, I don't know. Are they that
It's
naive? I mean,
Machiavellian. I mean, there's a really good book, 48 Laws of Power. I used to have the audiobook. I used to listen to it when I was on road trips, and one of the lessons in there that is used by every single world leader out there is the faking of religiosity because it convinces the sheeple who are easily led. It's that easy. You just you carry a Bible, take a picture, boom, they're all going to vote for you. It's sad, but it works.
well, it was Samuel Johnson who said that patriotism and piety are the last refuge of a scoundrel. It's when they find him and caught red-handed in their corruption, like Bob Menendez. I mean, the implications of that are not even. I know you're going to say it's all theater, but this guy, he's been in the United States Senate from New Jersey since 2006. He was chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Those are the guys that decide whether to appropriate like billions of dollars, whether to start a war, whether to stop a war, who's our friends, who's our enemy, what the foreign policy is. Like he wasn't compromised and blackmailed that whole time, and now they've got him supposedly with a stash of gold bullion in his basement and cash stuffed into jackets. And I know you're going to say
No, I look.
it's
I don't.
all made up,
I'm
aren't
not.
you? Are you going
I'm
to tell
not a
me it's all
reality
made up?
nihilist. Here's what I am. I do recognize that we live in this lie world order infrastructure, but it's on a need to know basis. Not everyone's in on how much is fake. It's very compartmentalized. But the fact that they're not really killing people doesn't take away from the fact that the terrorism is real and the real life consequences and changes in governance is real. So I don't just dismiss it all. I don't know how real these characters are, how much movement or freedom they really have, especially if they're heavily televised. And like Trump, for example, there's no way Trump's a rogue in my view. if you ask me, Trump is playing the role that was scripted before he was born. And I know that sounds, I don't know, black pill or it sounds pessimistic, but no, I think he's a wholly owned puppet of the monolithic media cult that runs this place.
How do they make it work? How do they make it? I exploit you, still you love me. I tell you, one and one makes three. The cult of personality, the cult of personality, the cult of personality. Everybody's looking for that Messiah to save them because they don't have the internal guts to face up to the implications of just how phony it all is. But see, the difference, me, is you're into the simulation aspect of it, and I'm into the simulacrum, which is to say, and I know you're into the simulacrum sometimes as well, but I'm really into the net effect that this is going to have as people who are like people or behavior, for example, is
Yes.
triggered. Where
You mentioned
you know,
the way that they're psychoanalyzing their target audiences. And lately, I've been really looking closely at it from this perspective. And I have a manuscript I'm developing on this very concept that if you look at media as singular, like mediation itself is like weather, it's just like it's this thing that we all have to contend with. And if we can give it a personality in general, what traits would you give it? Well, it talks down to you. It's the authority. You can't really talk back. And when you really get down to what's presented on there, the emotional roller coasters and the news cycle, I think you can argue that the media is narcissistic, that it's a gaslighter. And the long term effects of gaslighting are well known. You know what it does? It creates apathy. It causes people to second guess their perceptions and to go with the authority figures. So I'm suggesting that multiple generations of narcissistic media mind control has turned people into compliant sheeple.
I want to say something here about the term gaslighting because it's not always understood in the sort of rich sense that it should be. Um, we take it from the, I guess, late 1940s award. I think it was an Academy Award-winning thriller, a film called Gaslight, which shows how a very charming scoundrel seduces and tries to basically drive insane his beautiful young wife in order to get her fortune. And it's good, nice film to watch. But that's where the term gaslight comes from. But there's a larger meaning to it, or even a larger background to it. And I was reading about this in connection with the poet Edgar Allan and novelist and storyteller Edgar Allan Poe from Baltimore, my hometown. He's buried here. Um, Poe apparently, like many of his contemporaries, suffered from, you might say, the environmental poisoning of gaslight. That is to say, beginning in the 1820s, 1830s, 1840s, the predominant form of lighting in houses, the first lighting, permanent lighting that people had, street lighting and inside house lighting, was gas lighting. They started running gas first. Before there was electricity, there was gas. And gaslight continued to be, short of candlelight, continued to be the predominant form of indoor lighting right on up to the advent of of Edison and use of the electric light bulb, which really didn't show up, I don't think, until maybe the 1880s, 1890s. But Poe, Edgar Allan Poe, and others, if you were in such an environment, because it turns out that the gaslight that was used in these closed, tight environments, especially in the wintertime, was toxic. And it caused a variety of very, very negative, sometimes even fatal health conditions. Some of them were diagnosed as consumption, which is tuberculosis, and headaches, neurasthenia. And Poe complained constantly of the headaches and the bad dreams interfere with his sleep because he was living in the midst of, he was spending all this time writing his material with this gaslight burning in the back, heating and lighting where he lived, right there in Baltimore, Richmond,
Right,
other
right.
areas.
So he may have inadvertently, literally gaslit himself into, maybe it influenced his work. I don't know. Does it have any sort of
Well, that's
hallucinatory?
yeah.
Mm.
I think he sort of insisted on that himself. That he felt. I don't. I think he kind of sensed that the gaslight might be toxic, because he said he could smell it sometimes. He said other people said they couldn't. And it became something of a paranoid subject for him. But he wasn't the only one. We have French writers of the exact same period, Flaubert and others, who complain about the effect of the gaslight that was being used in the first modern indoor heating and lighting was gas, and it was not done well, and there was a lot of leakage, and just the exposure to it itself created all kinds of toxemia in people that was probably misdiagnosed as infectious disease. I wouldn't be surprised. But that's important to understand about the term gaslight. It has a much longer history than simply the,
Sure.
I guess it would be 1949
And it
classic
became
film.
like it kind of got grafted into this self-help area, probably in like the 90s or something, and then the internet recently brought it back.